Otherwise, I believe all the council members are here. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. It's Tuesday, May 26th. It's 7 p.m. And we are holding this meeting in a virtual format on Zoom. So we will start with our roll call. Candace.
Robin Klein.
Robin.
I actually don't see Robin.
Yeah,
Oh, there she is.
She was
just
there.
on here, yeah.
Her,
She looks
She's
like
but
she
she
might be
seems
frozen.
she's
muted.
frozen. Well, she's frozen.
Well,
I
I
will
can come
text
back
her.
to her. Isaac Shanley,
Here.
Eileen Nichols,
Here.
Kathy Kopp,
Here.
Jason Arts,
Here.
Barbara Doss,
Here.
Ken
I
Killian?
think,
Here.
I think Robin just disappeared. It appears she disappeared.
She's replaced by Joe.
I'm sure she'll be back.
Okay. I'm trying to text her at the same time. The first item on our agenda is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature. We have council minutes from May 5th and a special meeting, and May 12th, the regular meeting. We have payment of bills, appointments to boards and commissions. I have none tonight. Licenses, 1 and 2 year operator licenses to sell and serve alcohol, listing in your packet, and ratification of the City of Platteville state of emergency enacted May 18th, 2020. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Kathy to approve the consent calendar as presented. We'll vote.
Comments about the minutes.
You have a comment about the minutes.
Yes, 5/12/20.
Okay,
Okay, Dan Dresden is not here, but Howard Crowfoot, I saw him here somewhere. And my comment is about the $9 million project to improve Water Street. And the project involves prefab concrete. And what I am suggesting is that I'd like to find out if there's going to be independent approval of the prefab work. In other words, what I'm saying is there may be I assume a contractor making a prefab concrete, and then somebody has to approve it. So I'd like to find out who does the approval. I assume that is going to be independent of the person or the contractor making the prefab concrete. So I'd like that information.
so Ken, we didn't approve that project. So the appropriate time for that question, and I'm sure Howard will make note of it, is at the time we would approve any type project. So Howard, that would be, would you please make that note and put it in the file? It's really independent of the minutes, but we'll make that note and put it in the file for the Water Street project. So now we can vote. I notice.
What I'm getting at is that Delta 3 may be working a long time on this project, and whoever's working on it, and they need to know the quality of the concrete that's being used in this project. So
exactly, we understand that.
That shouldn't be lost here.
Nope. Robin?
It's not like doing stream bank reconstruction where if something happens to your work, you do it again, but if something happens to the prefab, that's another story. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and we now have our 7th council member. Robin, welcome. We saw you, but we saw you were frozen in time there. So Candace, note that Robin has now joined us, and we'll vote on the consent calendar. Motion by Ken, second by Kathy. So go
Klein,
ahead.
Shanley,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, under citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any, I have had a couple of people ask about speaking relative to the sidewalks on Business Highway 151. And there may be people joining us who want to talk about recreational programming and the municipal pool. I don't know who iPhone is. So I don't know, iPhone, if you want to speak on anything or one of those subjects. So perhaps the person who's identified here as iPhone could identify themselves and let us know if you want to speak on some topic. Hello, iPhone. Okay, Gary Lindahl is here. Gary, are you wanting to speak on one of the two topics I already talked about, the pool or the sidewalks? Tim, are you here to speak on anything? David. David Ralph. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I was here to speak on the sidewalks on US Business 151.
Okay, we'll call on you at that time. Amy? You have to unmute yourself.
I'm here to talk about the sidewalks and also be present in case there's questions about the mural.
Okay. So I don't think there's anybody here then that has any other issues. So we'll then move through citizens' comments, observations, and petitions onto reports. So we had reports in the board packet from the Freudenreich Animal Care Trust Fund Committee. Robin, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
I have a
Public-
question. I have a question.
Okay, Ken has a question on the Freudenreich Care, which set of
Okay.
minutes?
Well, 7/1/19. And it's a question about, the chief of police talks about the stray cat program. Would he please describe what the stray cat program is? And we spend about $2,600 per year for the program.
Okay, Chief McKinley.
Is Robin Klein the rep on this now?
Yes, she is.
But she
Chief?
wasn't- Oh,
Yep.
Okay, we need to know something about the stray cat program that we're spending $2,000 a year on.
That would be for stray cats that are picked up and taken to the vet clinic, where they are boarded and neutered or spayed and adopted out as appropriate.
So they're not turned loose? They go to some people.
They go to a shelter.
They're not turned loose in the city again? Or,
Not any cats that are brought to the PD.
do you have a program of catching stray cats? Or is this on a complaint basis, or what basis do you use for catching cats?
We do not actively seek them out. People can set their own traps that humanely catch them. And some people contract with animal control agencies, that are privately run. And those cats are sometimes taken to the vet clinic.
And then there was a comment on that, I think the same set of minutes, 7/1/19, by Dr. Keeler. And basically the comment was about dogs and license for dogs and rabies. So does that mean there are two different issues? One is dogs having a license, and two, dogs having rabies shots? Or are they one and the same?
You have to have proof of rabies vaccination to get a dog license.
Well, what percentage of the people in Platteville with dogs get a license?
I can't comment on that. We've never tried to or been able to capture that data.
Oh, it's unknown.
Unknown.
It's unknown.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to move on from the Freudenreich Animal Care Trust Fund?
I just want to point out that I'm brand new to it, Ken. I think Barb Stockhausen was on this through these
Yes.
meetings, so
No,
yet to attend.
I'm not picking you out. I know that.
No, just pointing out, answering your question.
You're new on it. Okay, I
Yeah.
noticed on the
Okay.
minutes of March 9th that UW Platteville students plan to set up a program as far as trapping, vaccinating, and adding microchips and releasing stray cats in the city. I guess I questioned about releasing the stray cats in the city. That's one thing. Also, it doesn't mention in their program about spaying of cats or neutering of dogs. I'm questioning whether those things will be done also in our program. Okay, we'll find out in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that was the first of the reports. The second report is from the Public Transportation Committee meeting of 3/12. And Robin, that's you. And I think we have something on the agenda tonight. So anything else?
Nothing else.
Robin? Okay, Water and Sewer Commission, Dawes, Killian, or Shanley. I have nothing to add. Isaac?
No addition.
Nothing. And Ken has nothing. Airport Commission, Kathy?
Just a comment, I know that on June 22nd, they do have a strategic planning session planned, starting at 4 o'clock.
Oh, man,
Great.
there's an easy shot there.
Library Board. Gonna have to figure out who's making. Library Board.
Nothing to add.
Klein. Nothing to add, okay. And Community Safe Routes Committee, Jason?
No, the biggest thing will be the sidewalk discussion, which is already on the agenda.
All right, so
Slide.
that's the reports that are on.
Us?
Somebody's
Somebody's on, but they're not muted.
I'm gonna have to mute some people here because we keep having interference. Okay, moving on, then we have for action tonight, contract 7-20, street maintenance. Howard.
Thank you. This is our standard annual project to do overlays of our selected streets using the estimated $120,000 in wheel tax funding. In recent years, we've only done thin overlays. That's a 3/4 inch overlay over the existing pavement. We will continue to do that for selected streets. This year, what we're trying to do is do a different pavement preservation technique, mill and overlay, where we would grind out about 2 inches of asphalt and then put back 2 inches of new asphalt. And I'm proposing that Main Street between Chestnut and Washington be the candidate for that. We did request multimodal local supplement funding for that, but that funding was denied. I also asked for local road improvement money for that. Grant County received a little over $91,000 for the biennium, and the committee split the funding evenly among the 10 communities. So we got a little over $9,000 to supplement our wheel tax fund. The good thing is that's the first time that we've got it in a long time. So we opened up the bid for our maintenance from Iverson Construction. And so staff is recommending spending just under $70,000 for thin overlays on the listed streets, and just under $69,000 for the Main Street, Chestnut to Washington Street. This would give us a slight deficit. We're proposing to use other CIP road construction funding from other projects that will be under budget to cover this shortfall. So we're recommending awarding the thin overlay and mill and overlay to Iverson Construction in the amount of $138,624.07.
Okay, questions? Jason?
The only thing, I can't remember if that extra deficit money has already been identified in terms of where it's going to come from. I know you had mentioned just from the CIP road construction funding. Are there certain projects that have been identified as being over budget that the money's coming from?
Under budget. Under budget.
Under budget, yeah.
Not specifically. We've used some under budget monies to do the additional block of Bradford Street, but I believe that we generally get quantities coming in under budget for a number of those projects, and I think that we'll be able to do that here.
Okay.
Kathy, questions?
All right. Nothing at this time.
Okay. Ken, questions?
No questions. We're just short of money.
Eileen, questions?
No questions.
Robin, questions?
Forgetting the term mill and I don't remember what you said it was called, but why are you starting that this year? Did you get new machinery or just really trying to do the preferred method and this is our first go, or why is this year significant in the change?
This is the first year that I believe that it's appropriate for some of the streets that we've had based on the condition of the streets and things like that. Main Street was redone in 96, was reconstructed in 96. We did some thin overlays on it in 09 and 2010. And I believe that it's time to do the next level of maintenance on that street.
So this is mill and overlay is more intrusive and longer lasting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Isaac, questions?
No questions.
Okay, so we've been around the table here and asking questions for contract 7-20 street maintenance. If we hearing, I don't think there's anybody here that wanted to talk about that. So we would then be ready to take a motion on the contract 720 street maintenance.
I'd make a motion. I'd make a motion to approve, excuse me, to award the contract 70-20 street maintenance to Iverson Construction for the proposed streets for thin overlay and mill and overlay in the amount of $138,624.07.
Second motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Isaac, a second by Ken. We'll vote.
Klein,
Yes.
Shanley,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Very good. We'll go on to the second item on our action agenda tonight, called Pioneering Past COVID-19, a guide to recovery, City Hall reopening plans. And Adam, I believe this is you.
That's me. So hi, everybody. Hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend. So this is another one of those kind of crazy times that we're in where normally we would try to bring this to you as soon as possible to get a lot of review. But as we've learned with COVID-19, you have to a lot of times roll with punches and kind of do some things that are a bit unorthodox. So this is something that potentially we're looking for as an action item tonight to be adopted by the council. But what we wanted to do is in a lot of the kind of League of Municipalities calls that I'm on, as well as the Grant County Health Department and emergency management calls, what we're seeing more and more municipalities are doing is kind of coming out with a guideline of kind of operations of what they want to look at trying to do in order to set the bar for what a reopening plan looks like and kind of what those guidelines are going to be. What a lot of municipalities have kind of noticed is because of the Supreme Court decision, it really created kind of a limbo in regards to what should, cities and municipalities be using as kind of the guidelines to reopening, ensuring that, they're following as safe, procedures as possible, but also taking into account, the wide spectrum now of residents that we have, where we still have, a lot of residents that are still very concerned about COVID-19, and we have some other residents that really have had enough and want to kind of go, gung ho. And our job as city staff, obviously, is to ensure that we're putting procedures and policies in place that is capturing all of those residents and including that we consider the safety. So, what you see here are pretty much some recommendations over the last 2 weeks. I worked with numerous staff members, and as well as Brian Allen's on the call too from our EMS department. And we literally went from building to building and kind of looked at, policies and procedures that we essentially would put in place and what makes sense to kind of be as transparent as possible as we can be for residents. So, what we created, and I can't take credit for it, the city of River Falls did a really nice job in creating a document that was kind of a guideline that we used and kind of put our own spin on it, that talks about kind of combining the requirements that were out there still with safer at home, looking at the Badger bounce back guidelines that continue to be updated by the Department of Health Services, and then also working obviously with your local county health departments and any local, hospital or anybody that you have to kind of create a blueprint of what, guidelines and procedures we're going to continue to follow to make sure that we're hitting and checking all those boxes of safety. So what we would like to do as far as recommendations is essentially this document continues to kind of be updated daily. I think as you saw before this meeting, Grant County now has their own official dashboard that they created and kind of pioneered themselves. So we would obviously be making updates in here as well. The library is also working right now on kind of creating their own plan based on requirements that they're seeing from the Department of Public Instruction. So these are things we're going to continue to try to update as we go on, and we'll pivot appropriately. But what we would like to look at doing is obviously disseminating this out to media sources, and also creating this finalized version and putting it out on our website. So it's a guide for everybody to kind of understand the benchmarks and things that we want to do, and we'll continue to pivot. Then also what we would like to look at doing then is City Hall will continue to be closed to the public until staff has had the ability to move into the remodeled office area located on the second floor. So our intention is that starting June 22nd, we essentially would officially kind of reopen up City Hall, but it would be on an only appointment basis, very similar to what we're doing now, and try to continue to push as much as we can to utilize you know, the website or phone calls or Zoom meetings, etc. Then what we'd like to look at doing is essentially kind of reviewing how that goes, continuing to conduct public meetings via Zoom. And as we've talked about, the June meetings we would look at having being done by Zoom. And then after kind of contacting and reviewing with Grant County Health Department and obviously seeing where everybody is falling in as far as the Badger Bounce Back Plan and with Grant County's recommendations, we then would review to see if our July council meeting then could possibly return to being in the open at City Hall again. We then tentatively would start looking as Monday, July 13th as being the target after consulting with Grant County Health Department and Southwest Hospital to be kind of the first, what we would consider full phase of reopening to the public at a greater capacity. What we're going to be looking at doing over the next couple of months here, obviously into June, is really kind of creating the steps we feel need to be done to social distance the buildings properly, all of our buildings. So that's putting up kind of, you know, the protective polyglass shields, ensuring that we have social distancing guidelines put in place, continuing to work with our partners to kind of monitor that, ensuring that we have proper meeting places available to have more in-person meetings in the 2s to 3s, and continuing to kind of work with all of those partners to monitor, you know, what that means for more public gatherings, you know, to go to 10, and then depending on the space, whether it's the Brodsky Center or kind of as we're continuing to have these conversations about recreation, you know, what is that magic number? What is the criteria that allows you to expand? So those are kind of all the things that, you know, tentatively we would like to look at doing, putting signage in proper places, you know, updating our procedures. We would be recommending, obviously, that anybody coming in, you know, would be wearing a mask. Again, and if not, then we're going to try to do what we can to social distance appropriately, having some spaces available so that we target, again, that wide range of audience. But what this document kind of does is it just basically kind of lays the groundwork of providing a summary of, you know, what occurred, how we got here, everything we've done since the point of kind of the major, you know, stay-at-home orders were put in place, what the city has been doing, and what we continue to kind of look at to ensure that, you know, we're prepared as a municipality to continue to kind of work, you know, not only as staff, but as residents to fight this thing head on. So that's kind of the quick, kind of short summary version. I guess I'll answer any kind of questions or concerns that you might have.
First of all, Adam, I'd also like you to, one of the things that I had Adam do was check with our insurers, because it's almost, I mean, I think we have to be prepared that someone will get sick. They will get sick in our facility. They will blame us, and then they will sue us. And so I had Adam work with our insurance people to talk about how we can mitigate that, because you and we all know that we don't have a lot of extra money around to pay for litigation. So Adam, if you would talk about insurance and what we've been advised by our insurers.
Yeah, so certainly that is kind of the million-dollar question that continues to be asked by a lot of municipalities is, as we look to reopen to allow, you know, more public gatherings, you know, whether the pool, you know, playgrounds, et cetera, all of those things, and just city buildings in general, you know, that concern is a valid question. So both Administrative Director Maurer and myself met with via Zoom, safely, of course, on a call, and kind of asked the questions. And obviously we had Lori Lubinsky, who is the attorney that specifically represents the insurance company that we have. You know, they never want to give a formal opinion, but they did basically say there were a lot of key kind of points we asked. And one was, you know, specifically we asked, does the city have discretion over the interpretation of handling of orders and mandates? And absolutely we do. And the general synopsis was, as long as we are doing everything we can to ensure we're making, you know, the safest protocols possible. We're doing the best we can and putting that information out there. Our insurance company did say that if somebody would try to sue us, we would be covered. You know, that is something that would be covered. The same thing, we are not obligated to close the parks, but if we were to allow people to utilize the recreation equipment or shelters, and we had the appropriate signage indicating the recommendations that are being made by Grant County, DHS, CDC, and just having that information on our websites, again, that's the best practice. We're ensuring that we're providing that information to our residents, and we would have, you know, we would be covered then by our insurance company. Same thing with events. You know, as long as we're ensuring that we're telling them about all the dangers that can occur and the recommendations that are out there, we again would have coverage by the insurance company. I asked, kind of pitched all those questions to them and got something back in writing saying, you know, you are correct that at present the city has the discretion in terms of whether to follow the recommendations and guidelines that have been issued. And if someone attempted to challenge those decisions, your coverage would defend against a challenge to those. So pretty much that's the general guidelines that they gave, is as long as we continue to put that information out there, if it would be, you know, if the city does go in a different direction, but we make sure that, you know, whatever policy we put in place is sound and justified and is doing it as the best interest of everybody, our insurance company indicated we would have coverage. I think, Nicola, you were also on that call. Is there anything I'm missing, or is that pretty much the synopsis you got out of those calls too?
Yeah, I think you summarized it effectively. Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
I know, Brian, you are on the call. Is there anything you would like to say about, before we start our once around here, is there anything you'd like to say about your visit to the facilities and what you saw and how this plan, Guide to Recovery, came together?
We met with Adam, went through City Hall. He already had most of the plan done. Did ask some specific questions. It was things I think he already, had already done really well with. I don't know that we even had any recommendations for changes. Everything was as he had set it in the plan.
Is that it, Brian?
Yep, I don't have anything else.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we'll start the once around. Jason, your comments, questions, ideas, pioneering past COVID-19.
I don't have any questions at this time. I think it's a pretty good plan, write-up plan, so yeah.
Okay, Kathy, your comments, questions?
Yeah, there's just a lot of questions as far as events. So it's kind of hard to, when you read things that are, what the county is saying, what the CDC is saying, now if the city comes out with a statement, what is the best way for groups to know if they can have events within the community? For example, we met as a 4th of July committee today, trying to work through some things there. The Chamber has their Southwest Music Festival the end of July. Main Street has their Music in the Park series. Is there some sort of a guiding reference? I totally understand the discussion about having to have insurance for lawsuits, but I can guarantee you the groups that are working on these traditional events don't want lawsuits either. And I get a lot of questions as far as the event angle. So Adam, do you have any suggestions? Is there a general rule of thumb?
Yeah, I think you're hitting a really good question, Kathy, and the one that's the hard one to try to figure out. I think what I would say is the best practice of what I've seen is if we're aware of the event, the recommendation would be similar to, I would say, almost what was done with the farmers market, was where we kind of had a group call that got together, and that would probably be the first recommendation I would make is if we know these events are occurring, it might not be a bad idea to set up a conference call or a Zoom call where we have the key players in those conversations, where it's the city, it's, we get Grant County Health Department on there. We can even have Southwest Hospital, because I think, as we said, our concern is we truly want these events to be able to occur. The question is, we just don't know what that game plan looks like, because we're all in a learning phase right now with this virus. And so I think the biggest steps we can look at is continuing to have those conversations with the key players that all have to be responsible for that. It's our police department, our fire department, our EMS, the city, and just ensuring that we're getting that information out there to make those recommendations. I think that's the hard part for the city, is we don't have a public health office. So it's hard for me as the city manager to make a determination and say, well, we're going to go down this road, when I just don't have that background. So I think the council would be in the same boat as we would. That's why you've seen less and less municipalities kind of creating their own orders, because could they do it? Sure. But just like you said, it's that question of, is that going to hold up if somebody challenges it? Probably not. So I think it's continuing that message of, we all need to work together and ensure that, the recommendations are, if Grant County says, well, you probably really shouldn't have that event, that doesn't mean you don't have it, but it just means if you're going to do it, then we need to take the extra precaution to ensure what steps we have to put in place to try to make it as safe as possible.
I think I sent everybody a copy of the bounce back plan, and often in this recovery document, that's cited. And so there's a pretty good chart in the bounce back plan that talks about when you can have 10 people maximum, when you can have 50 people maximum, and when there's no maximum. So, I think that, like Adam said, I read something today and it said, if you open school this fall, people are going to be angry. If you don't open school this fall, people are going to be angry. If you have Little League, people are going to be angry. If you don't have Little League, people are going to be angry. I mean, the spectrum is wide. I know people who think it's a hoax yet, who think that all of these statistics are made up, that no one has died anywhere. And I know people who have yet to leave their house. So the spectrum on this particular illness is so great that it makes it very, very difficult. Okay, Kathy, we'll go on to Ken. Questions, comments on pioneering past COVID-19, a guide to recovery.
Go back to the first page. The third paragraph, it says residents, customers are encouraged to wear a face mask. Why wasn't it put in to require to wear a face mask? Certain places we go to, such as the hospital, have required a face mask. Isn't City Hall worthy of enough protection as far as wearing a face mask? I guess that's a question for Adam.
Yep, so that was a question that came up in our insurance conversations and on a lot of the League of Municipalities calls. And because we are a public entity that is taxpayer funded, there is a very strong recommendation that you cannot require residents to wear a face mask, but you can very much request and alter the method where if they don't want to, then maybe you still have a requirement to service that resident, but you may ask them to do something different, go into a different area, go into a different room. It's one of those ones that is currently a bit legally leaning where there isn't a very good answer at this point in time. So the general recommendation that has been made by the legal side of things is You can't require, but you can strongly recommend.
But that could leave a lot of people at risk. All it takes is the few people, one person to get many people infected.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Eileen, comments, questions?
No, I don't have any comments or questions, Barb.
Isaac,
No questions or comments.
Robin, Robin?
Sorry, I think I was unmuted.
No questions? No questions, okay.
Why?
All right, so then are we?
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. So
I didn't do
are we
anything
ready
differently.
then? Okay. Are we ready then to take action on this? As Adam said, this was not on for information and discussion last time. A good reason, the reasoning behind that is that these situations develop so fast that sometimes it's just not possible to do it over a month. So I guess my question is, are you ready to vote on this or are you not? And do I have a motion of any sort?
I have a question.
What?
I'm wondering if Doug would want to chime in as to any concerns that really are presented. You pass this that you don't feel prepared for, or are you comfortable with what's here? What are the implications?
I think a lot of thought has gone into this, and I'm on board with the reopening plan as it currently stands.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, folks, do I hear, what's your pleasure?
Hey,
Barb,
Jen.
I would
Do I
make a
have a
motion. I would make a motion, Barb. Yep.
To adopt
I would move to
the
officially,
guide?
yes, to officially approve the dissemination of the recovery guide and municipal building reopening plans.
Okay,
Second.
I have a motion. Did I hear a second?
Yes, you did.
There, Ken. We had a second
Ken.
from Ken. So motion by Eileen and a second by Ken to approve the dissemination of this guide to recovery. I think we all know and have an understanding that at some point in time, Adam may need to come back and add to it or make changes based on new recommendations and new things that are happening. So Candace, we have a motion and a second, so we'll vote.
Klein,
Yes.
Ganley,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Hop,
Kathy?
Yes.
Okay,
Arts,
Yes.
Doss,
yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, that's the last of our action items for tonight. We'll move on to information and discussion items. As we hear thunder,
Yeah.
in case you all wondered what that was. The Fire Department Comprehensive Analysis, RFP. And Adam, are you taking that? Okay,
Yep, I will take this
and I
one
see
too.
Ryan is here too.
Ryan's here as well. Yeah. So just to kind of recap, so obviously one of the 2020 strategic goals that we have was to look at creating a fire station comprehensive and conceptual plan. So throughout kind of the months of spring here, we talked about looking into doing this and kind of came up with 8 key scopes of service that we wanted a firm to kind of review. And our thought process was to get kind of options and alternatives on firms doing 1 through 8 and what that would cost us, and then splitting it out into variations of doing 1 through 4, which kind of focused on the kind of 50,000 view pie in the sky analysis of look, 20, 50 years down the road and consider what the fire department would need. And then 5 through 8 really focused on the buildings. So we essentially got the council backing to put that RFP out there. And from April 20th to May 15th, we had allowed firms to kind of review the information and submit us proposals. And we ended up receiving 6 different proposals. One from McGrath Consulting Group out of Wonder Lake, Illinois. Public Administration Associates and Five Bugle Design out of Wisconsin submitted a proposal. Public Consulting Groups out of Boston, Massachusetts. Barry Dunn out of Portland. Management Partners out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And FEH Design out of Dubuque. So what city staff is considering is looking at creating a fire department comprehensive analysis RFP subcommittee to review all of the 6 submissions. Staff feels this is the best way to provide the Common Council with a formal recommendation and assure all 6 firms are weighed evenly. If a council member would like to receive a copy of the various proposals for review, city staff would be more than willing to provide that. But what we thought we would do is have this group get together, and it would be composed of Bill Closter, who is one of the fire department citizen fundraising group members that we've been meeting with throughout the process. Jason Arts as the council member, Ryan Simmons as the fire chief, myself as the city manager, Nicola Maurer as the administration director, and then Mike Delecky from the Platteville Police and Fire Commission president. What the committee would do then is they would meet as many times necessary over the next 2 weeks and use a similar process that we've done in the past with an RFP evaluation score sheet to evenly weigh the proposals. And then the committee would be tasked with bringing a formal recommendation to the Common Council for their consideration for approval on June 9th, 2020. So that's kind of the quick update, and just kind of to quickly summarize the budget and fiscal impacts. So if you remember in the 2020 adopted budget, there was a capital line item that was created for $75,000 to be utilized towards the creation of this plan. The funds were to be dispersed with $25,000 being allocated from the city and then $50,000 coming from other revenue sources. So we're going to start working with obviously the citizen fundraising group and other organizations who have been interested in this proposal to start ensuring that those capital funds that have been discussed are going to be there for when the decision would need to be made. But that's kind of the brief update for you. I'll take any questions that you have.
And I'll start by saying thank you, Jason, for agreeing to be the council rep to this. And I didn't have this put on for action because I think this is really a management decision. So Jason, do you have questions on the presentation?
No questions.
Okay. Kathy?
No questions.
Ken?
I would like a copy of every proposal, as pointed out at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'd like a copy of the RFP evaluation score sheet for every proposal. Since it's reading at times, I'll have time to read them.
Good. Eileen, any questions?
No, no question.
Eileen?
No, no
Isaac, any
question.
questions?
No, I'd agree with Ken. I'd like a copy of the same thing Ken would like a copy of as well.
Okay. And Robin, any questions?
I was going to ask for a copy as well.
So it seems like if you can make those as PDFs, I mean, I would take a copy too. A PDF would be preferable to me to more paper.
I can certainly do that.
And Robin, can you take a PDF?
Yes, please.
And Isaac is fine, PDF?
Yep.
Ken, you'll want a hard copy, I'm sure.
What's this?
You want a hard copy, regular paper,
Yes,
right?
Yeah, yes.
That's it. Okay.
Easy to read.
Easy to read. Okay. You can underline. Okay.
Underline
All
and
right.
keep it for a souvenir.
All right. And it would be in June. You said by June the 9th. I'm trying to figure out our next meeting would be June the 9th. Are you thinking this committee will bring back a recommendation at our next committee meeting?
That's
At
our
our
hope.
next council meeting, pardon me.
Yeah.
And then we would put it on for information at that meeting, and then it would be action at the second meeting in June. Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. Now let's talk about the transit mural on Hickory Street by Olsvik Hall. Howard, is this you?
Yes, it's me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not the art type, but this is a really great thing. The art class at UW Platteville developed a mural depicting a transit theme that would go inside the crosswalk. It is legal to do a mural or other art within the crosswalk as long as the white painted lines are there. What's inside of those white painted lines you can do with art or something like that. The class worked with our transportation committee, and the committee has selected a mural, and that's in your packet, the blue mural. You can see it as you drive in either direction on the street. It highlights our many modes of transportation here in Platteville. So what we're asking the council is whether or not you want to allow a mural to be painted on a city street. And we're asking you to say yes, and that this mural be the one that's approved at this location. We're thinking that if things go well, that maybe there'll be future ones at other locations near the university, possibly in downtown or other places that could highlight other aspects of Platteville. But this is kind of the precedent-setting item. So we want you all to understand the implications and decide whether or not you want to do this. One of the nice things about this is that the university will pay for the time and materials. The students and faculty shall paint and seal the mural, and we've seen that in other communities, murals of this nature, if you have to pay for it, can exceed $50,000. So we're getting a good deal. They're getting experience. They're getting some art training and everything. So I think this is a good deal, and this would be a nice place to do this.
Okay, Robin, you're on this committee, right?
I just started, so I got to be on this last meeting.
And where this was discussed?
Yeah, I think they've been discussing it all semester with the students, but we're the final decision on which mural to select. So I was delighted to be in on that meeting because I really do love this idea. I think the only question I've come up with that I don't know that I asked in that meeting was just how long you anticipate it lasting in good condition and what sort of maintenance will be needed. But I would love to see us support this.
Okay. So Howard and Amy, you're here on behalf of this mural project, is that correct? Okay, so
Yes.
the question has been raised now by Robin in our first question of what is the plan for how long these things last, and then who has responsibility for its maintenance, repainting or whatever. So Howard, do you or Amy, who's going to take this?
I can start. I mean, I can launch in. Howard can answer this just as well. The artist who's been painting it or designing it with his class, he did a lot of research on the best way to do this. And it sounds like we'll power wash and then pre-gesso it. So he's being really cautious to install the painting correctly. And the paints that are going to be used are the same paints, I guess, that we often use for road striping in our community. Howard, you can tell me, there's a nuance to that, I know, but yes, so we'll use the same paints that are usually used on roads, on our city and on campus. And what I've been seeing is those paints tend to last looking pretty good for about 5 years, it seems. At least is what I'm noticing. Howard, you can add in with some of that. But we talked about we can either repaint it at that point or scrub it off.
Howard?
Use of epoxy paints, as they're suggesting, lasts 4 to 5 years generally. I mean, there will be scuff marks when the plows go over them and things like that. We'll just have to see how well it works. I've heard from other people that places in snowbelt areas such as Wapaka and things like that have done murals, and they've worked out really well as well. So, you know, I just think that it's time we can see it. 3 to 5 years, probably.
Okay. So we'll start our once around. Jason, do you have questions that you'd like answered?
No
Or comments to make?
Pretty
Okay.
excited about it, so yeah.
Okay. Kathy, comments or questions?
I like the idea a lot. My one question would be, at the end of 4 or 5 years, the maintenance, what happens then if it needs to be cleaned up or redone?
Yeah, I think that was Robin's question too. And we've heard that the paint will last about 5 years, and I guess we'll see how long it takes to chip away. And I believe Amy said if it can't be redone, they'll scrub it off. Is that right, Amy?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious, since this is the first time we're doing it. It's hard to like know at this point if we should touch it up at that point or remove it. So I'd be hesitant to promise, or I think it might be premature to promise which action is appropriate depending upon how our community reacts to it. That'd be my thought.
Okay.
We could have a contest to see if Howard and I can paint it back into its original shape.
I love it.
Yeah, that would be quite a deal, Adam. Okay, Ken,
Clearly on
questions or
board.
comments? Ken?
Well, I have one first comment. What's the speed limit along that street, and what is the possibility of distraction as far as traffic?
So your question is about speed on that street and whether this mural would be distracting to a driver. Okay, Howard?
Speed limit is 25 miles per hour, but they rarely go that fast because you're going between 2 stop signs at Main and Pine Street. As far as distraction, I don't know. I suppose the first time through it could be a distraction to some people, but after people drive over it a number of times, it probably becomes part of the background.
It's like reading a small print sign. You go over it and you can't read it. So some of the
There you
stuff
go.
you can miss.
Okay. Eileen, questions or comments?
No, just that I think obviously there'll be something in writing that makes it clear whose responsibility it is to either remove it or to repaint it.
So Howard, you want to make sure that that gets added in, please?
Okay.
But I like the idea. I think it's really
Yeah,
a
I think-
nice idea.
Isaac, any questions or comments?
Just echo what Eileen just stated about after the 4 or 5 years, the cost of the removal
Okay.
or the repainting.
Yep. And Robin, any additional?
No.
No. And I think it's a great idea too. And I think coming up at the beginning with how it's going to be maintained and who's going to be responsible is a great suggestion. So I think with those couple of items, Adam and Howard, we can move this to action for the June the 9th.
Okay.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is sidewalks on Business Highway 151. And Howard, we'll give you this one.
Me again. Okay, we do have the Highway Safety Improvement Program funded project for safety on 151 from Staley to Insight. This is a 90-10 funded project where The federal contribution is capped at 90% of the overall budget. 10% is funded locally, and anything above that is to be funded locally. It includes the highway improvements to change this into a 3-lane road with a center left turn lane, except at the major intersections where we already have left turn lanes. It improves pedestrian accommodations with crosswalk at Staley Avenue. It improves bicycle accommodations from Staley to Water with a wide shoulder lane. It improves the Water Street intersection with pedestrian signals, handicapped accessibility, and connections to the trail. It includes installation of new sidewalk on the north side of Business 151 from Water to Ellen in front of Walgreens. It improves pedestrian bicycle accommodations from the trail starting at the Novus Napa driveway east to East Side Road with a shared use trail. It improves the intersection of East Side Road with pedestrian signals. And then we also have replacement of signals at East Side Road, Mineral Street, plus one thing that's not in there is the installation of monotubes at Insight Drive. Now, I need to correct what may be a misunderstanding. All of these items that I've just talked about ended up coming in over budget by about $500,000. I think some people may have have a misunderstanding or misperception based on the way that I said this, that the signals at East Side Road and Mineral Street only is the cause of the increase. We have a lot of other increases. Now, the Safe Routes Committee has reviewed the plans, and they note that businesses along the south side of Business 151 from Water Street to Valley Road do not have a sidewalk or a pedestrian connection to the trail. They note that now is the time to do that. If it doesn't happen now, it won't happen for a long time. When the development at the southeast corner where Dunkin' Donuts is, when that was approved, the council imposed a condition that said that the owner shall install sidewalks at their cost when directed by the council. The other 3 parcels between there and Valley Road do not have such an agreement. Since it would be placed within the city-owned right-of-way, we are within our rights to place a sidewalk there. We do have the ability to do special assessments. However, that has not been the practice of the city for a long time now. This section of sidewalk is about 680 feet. When you put it as part of a state project, I estimate that it will probably be closer to $75,000 just for the section that is east of the Dunkin' Donuts property. I'm showing here that we've got a number of different options. The first option obviously is to do nothing. There would be no sidewalk. It would deny safe accessibility to these properties for 20 years or more. With the sidewalk on the north side, we're anticipating that people will walk on that sidewalk and then attempt to make crossings to the different businesses on the south side in a relatively unsafe manner outside of our designated crossings. Option 2 would be to install the sidewalk. The owner of the Dunkin' Donuts lot would pay for theirs, and the city would fund the rest from general fund taxes, the way it's been done. This would add approximately $75,000 to the CIP. Third option would be to install sidewalk across the Dunkin' Donuts lot only and provide a design for a future sidewalk across the other 3 properties. But there would be no sidewalk installation at this time. Option 4 would be to install the sidewalk and impose special assessments. So at this point, we recommend the installation of as much sidewalk as can be funded. That would, preferred option would be number 2, but if it cannot, then recommending approval of option 3 to include the design only.
Okay, I do have a question before you go any further. Howard, you said something about, because it's a part of this project, the sidewalks would likely cost $75,000. If this was not a part of the project, would the sidewalks be less expensive?
Most likely, yes. Probably, if we did it on our own without, not in conjunction with this project, it would probably be in the neighborhood of $60,000 or so.
For the whole expanse from Dunkin' Donuts, or for just the 3 lots?
Just the 3 lots.
Just the 3 lots. So it'd be basically $5,000 a lot. It looks to me like when you look at those are all about the same size. So it's about $25,000 a lot to put that sidewalk in. So an estimate for the Dunkin' Donuts or owner would be a $25,000 bill to put that sidewalk in.
Possibly. I didn't.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just eyeballing it. I guess I have one other question. The 1.8 million has
Yes.
now turned into 2.3 million because
Yes.
the budget did not, because everything is over budget. Can you explain how, did we choose the $1.8 million figure, or did somebody choose it for us? How is it that we're 5 million or 500,000 short, $500,000 short?
Okay. Some of it has to do with intersection improvements and signal improvements at intersections. A lot of it, unfortunately, has to do with the way that the trail will end up being designed from Novus Napa all the way out to East Side Road. Because of the rock cut, there will be additional walls that will be needed. We did have some walls figured into the plan, but we're being a little bit more conservative because of the way that the rock, the existing rock along that face is. If the rock does not hold up properly, then you'll need more walls. The other part in this is that there was very little consideration for additional drainage with that trail, because once you put the trail in, you're putting it in on what's now the drainage ditch for the roadway. So you need to accommodate that drainage, and that was not looked at in as much detail during the budgeting process. So all of these items just kept adding up and adding up. And so, we can back off on some of the items to decrease that 500,000 shortfall, and we will. But we're only talking 115,000 maybe. Downgrading a little bit here and downgrading a little bit there. So it's still a significant shortfall.
And so we can't apply for more highway improvement safety fund. We can't get a boost in that number.
No, we got one boost already because of the additional work that we were doing to the Water Street intersection, and we're at the maximum of the federal dollars available for this project.
Okay. Okay, I know that there are several people in our audience who wanted to talk, to say something. So I'm going to start around, and we'll do that before we have a council go around. So Dave Ralph, you had contacted me and you wanted to talk about this, so you're on.
Thank you. I'm not an engineer of any type, so I don't want to start talking numbers and charts and graphs or anything. But on the maps I've seen, whether they were taken by a drone, in the old days it would have been a blimp, but now I guess it's a drone or a satellite. This sidewalk is more than just your typical sidewalk. It's going to connect the trail not just for bicyclists, but for pedestrians that are staying at hotels, for people that are going to be dining at local restaurants. It's a very key hub in terms of a number of different types of transportation. If we were putting together a big jigsaw puzzle of the city, and you could pick 3 or 4 key pieces that would mess things up, you would pull out these pieces of the puzzle practically. And I know the city and a lot of community organizations and businesses like to promote Platteville, you know, come stay, come play. This is the kind of thing we need to really give people, not just visitors, but our own residents, proof that we're doing what's safe and what's right, and give them a positive memory to take away from their interaction. And I close my case with that.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank
we have Amy, did you want to speak on this issue?
Yeah, just as a resident though, not as a staff member at the university, I think it's very exciting that we can talk about putting the sidewalk in. It's been years in coming. I've been talking about how nice it'd be to have a sidewalk here since I moved here in 2008, I believe, so 11 years. I walk out along that street frequently, and I see other people doing it too, and it's really terrifying with young children to go get an ice cream at Culver's or even Dairy Queen, depending upon which way you're going. I see a lot of people walking right in that little corridor. So not to repeat David, but I think it's not just a regular sidewalk. It's a really high impact sidewalk, particularly for pedestrians.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Wayne, did you want to speak on this topic? Wayne?
I'm more concerned about the crosswalk down by Staley. I've only been in my position at the chamber for 5 months, but I have seen numerous cars zooming above the speed limit coming around that corner. And I just think that's going to be very, very unsafe, whether you've got lighted flashing signs telling people that there's a crosswalk or not. I just see the number of cars that come in, and they even go into our parking area to get to the annex. They're in such a hurry to get somewhere that I just think that's a terrible place for a pedestrian crosswalk, especially when there's not even coming off of a sidewalk from Staley. It's just like a sidewalk or a crosswalk coming from nowhere, unless they're coming out of the parking lot from the Mexican restaurant there. So that's my concern.
Okay, Howard, you've heard the concern about the safety at Staley and whatever we call that, Business Highway 151 or whatever it is. So I assume that you'll have something to say about that when the time comes. Jesse's not. Christina.
Yeah, thank you. I'm at 945 7th Avenue. I'm also the chair of the Community Safe Routes Committee. So yeah, we've been talking about this as this intersection and these sidewalks for a long time. And now that this project is underway, this really is the perfect time to be installing these sidewalks right now. We can access these businesses and of all ages, right? We, just like Amy said, like there's kids down there, they're using the trail and they have their freedom using the trail. The trail is awesome for these kids and they want to go to these businesses. And this is gonna provide them that safe access. So whether it's the residents, the university students, the people in the hotels, this is an excellent opportunity for us to provide this sidewalk. And if we don't do it now, we're really never gonna get it. And this should have been part of the project from the very beginning. I don't know why it wasn't. Because it is current practice to provide sidewalks in front of businesses. That's what the ordinance says, right? And so this should have been part of it from the very beginning. And it's just such an exciting opportunity for Platteville. So I really hope that you can support the second proposal to install the sidewalks right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen, are you here to speak on these sidewalks?
Yes, I am. And I would just echo what we've heard from other Safe Routes committee members. And as a parent, I live up by Medical Associates, and so we use the trail to get down so far, but then we kind of get stuck. If we want to try to get over to Dairy Queen, there's no easy way. If we want even get into Dunkin' and things, it's a perfect time to act on it, and I think we would be wise to do so.
Thank you. Brian, you don't. Jeremy Johnson, you're not here for this sidewalks? No, that's what I thought. All right, I'm going to the next page. I think we have other people. Gary Lindahl. Gary.
Yeah.
Are you here for sidewalks?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I just be brief. I would just echo what Christina was saying in that support of what she was talking about. I think it's a great opportunity for Platteville to provide that access for all those as pedestrians and such to use that type of area by sidewalk. I've traveled to other places where I find where I've been in hotels, being on bus trips. I've also been bus driver and I'm housed in a place that I want to go to get to those places and such, but they don't necessarily provide sidewalks and I'm having to find using the ditch. So anyway, this just makes access for the community and visitors to use that area in Platteville. So I hope that we can see that be able to be implemented here in this future plan.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And I believe Tim Bolt, you are next.
Yeah, Barb, I guess my question too, I think Wayne hit on it just a little bit. I didn't know he was going to be on there. The crosswalk, I know that on Staley, coming off of Staley, they got planned very close to closer to the bridge than the intersection. And once again, there is, I think, a huge concern about vehicles semis coming around that corner. I know you can't have a police officer sitting there 24/7. So I think it's going to be kind of tough to get people slowed down there. So I don't know if there's something that can be done about that. So that's one concern. The other concern is obviously, and Howard and I have talked in front of our business, Pioneer Ford, with our driveways the way they are. I would like to talk a little bit more on that because it's going to create a mess right there. And like I said, Howard and I have talked, but I will talk to him more about that as well. But we're trying to get it worked out.
Okay, thank you. I believe that would probably be all the people. I know Bennett and Steve, you're on. Eric is on, but I don't think, Eric, you probably care about talking about sidewalks. Jessie Lee Jones is on. I think she's a library. We have Luke. Luke, do you have anything to say about this sidewalk?
I mean, I'm obviously a member of or not a member, but staff representative on the Safe Routes Committee. You've heard from many of those members tonight, so I would just, echo what they would have been saying.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, Howard.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I did receive a phone call from one of the property owners along there who is not very happy with the prospect of having sidewalk along that section of Business 151. I'm just saying that the accolades that you've heard tonight are not universal.
And I would also mention that council members got an email from Tim Ingram from Momentum Bikes, living at, and his support for the sidewalks. So, or these sidewalks that have been proposed. He talks about seeing people walking along 151 and how unsafe, Business Highway 151 and how unsafe that is. So I believe that was the only sidewalk email that I received. So Jason, we're gonna do our once around now, or maybe we'll have to go twice, who knows? So Jason, questions, comments, concerns? Sidewalks on Business Highway 151. We're not talking about the design of the road as much as we're talking about the sidewalks that would go from the Business 151 corner to the bridge. And Howard, you've heard the concern about the Staley Avenue crossing, so we're gonna not go there. All right, so Jason, sidewalks.
Nothing to add that's not already been mentioned by some other people that have spoke, so.
Okay, and so Howard has indicated that we could be adding as much, we could already be committing as much as 575,000 of our CIP for this project. That's in addition to the 10%, Howard? Or have we already allocated the 10%?
No, that would be in addition to the 10%.
So that'd be another 180, right?
Yes.
So 180. So generally speaking, our CIP for road projects is about $1.5 million. Is that right, Nicola?
A little less.
Road projects, is it a CIP?
Between $1 million and $1.25 million.
Okay, $1 million and $1.25 million. So this would eat up a significant amount of that.
Like half of that, yeah.
Well, more than, yeah. Would it would be at least of half of what is available, would be available.
Okay.
Okay. Kathy. Questions, comments?
As far as sidewalk, I want to reiterate both what Wayne and Tim said. I spent over 2 decades at the chamber, and the best thing that happened for public safety was when they put the trail on next to the stream, because the purpose of that was to keep people off of the road. But I too have a concern about putting a pedestrian crosswalk anywhere near Staley. And then as far as Howard, if you can talk to Tim and Wayne, there's also a concern with the waterway. There's some significant water that comes off of the road there, and the sidewalk, I would be curious to see the plan for where the sidewalk goes, so that it, my impression is that it would eat into Katie's garden, and I would have an issue with that.
Okay, so Howard, runoff on Staley and the whole proposed crossing where it's at and all of that. Okay.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't have the Business 151 intersection to Valley Road. You have no questions or concerns. Ken, questions, concerns, or comments?
Question? Yeah, I want a review question. The sidewalk at Staley, will the sidewalk there be on the south side of the street? Going that whole distance to Water Street?
No.
This is a review question.
Okay. The thought has been, the intent was that we would install a crossing at Staley Avenue, specifically for folks like the Dodge House Apartments and others to get across Business 151 to get to the chamber and the other businesses along there. There would be a connection to the trail through Katie's Garden and next to the chamber, the way that it is right now. But that's it right now.
Will there be no sidewalk along the road? The distance from Staley to water?
Not from Staley to water.
Nothing.
No.
So
The
you
idea
can't
would be
go on to the
trail.
trail. Okay, that's my review question. As far as the going from water to Valley Road, in general, I am in favor of this. My concern, of course, is the cost. Thank you.
Eileen?
Yes, I am in favor of putting the sidewalk from Water Street to the bridge, basically, because I think we need the connectivity. I don't know what to say about Staley Avenue. I know that's really not maybe what we were talking about, but I think it's a good point, especially with the new building going up that's a laundromat, I believe. So I don't know if there's any way to utilize any of that frontage of that lot to get people a little further away from Staley before they cross. They'd be further from the bridge. But again, it might be too late. The planning has been done, but just that lot was not sold at the time this plan was actually put together. So now that we know we will have more cars going in and out of there as well, I think it just adds to congestion at Staley Avenue. But yes, I'm in favor of the sidewalk. I understand it will be costly. It won't get any cheaper if we wait.
Okay. Isaac?
Couple things quickly, just kind of what Eileen said on the Staley Avenue portion. I would agree. I think there should be a crosswalk there, but I think it should be to the east a little bit farther. But anyways, what we're talking about tonight, the sidewalk from Water Street over to Valley Road, I think we should have a sidewalk there, and I think now is the time to do it. And I would be in favor of option number 2 that we have on there. Some people have made the comment, well, the trail runs behind all those buildings, which it in fact does. However, most people don't realize there's a large ditch or somewhat of a swamp, so you still cannot get to those buildings. The time to do it is now. Money savings wise, when there's one project going on, you will save money to do it all at one time. Time wise, all those all those properties on there will only have to have their frontage tore up one time instead of doing it now and then 10 years, which probably actually won't get done for over 10 years if we don't do it now. I know Howard had just stated that he'd gotten a call from one of the businesses doing some griping about it. But realistically, that sidewalk will improve and help every one of those businesses on the frontage that gets that sidewalk. More people walking to them. The Safe Routes is promoting the walking in town, the bicyclist use in town. That's one thing that'll help do it. And again, it'll get more people down to the trail as well. So I'd be in favor of it, and I would be in favor of option number 2.
Okay, thanks, Isaac. Robin?
I'm in favor of it. I would probably go with 2. It just begs the question if the Safe Routes has ever considered the conversation about assessing property owners for sidewalks. I feel like that's something that needs to be researched more public opinion before we venture into that, even though it's a tempting conversation and it was put as an option for us. I guess I would just like some general feedback as to what people think, if it's a never touch it thing, or if we would do a percentage wise or anything like that. The crosswalk, just touching on it, are students still using it? I mean, are they using Katie's Garden pathway? Some, yes, but do we have any sort of count on how often students or just community members are crossing that highway at bar time, that sort of thing. And flashing lights would be better than nothing. So we could have some sort of notice sooner than the actual crosswalk up around the corner on the hill to let vehicles know to slow down. Probably would be a good idea.
Okay, Howard, do you have any, you've now heard from folks about the sidewalk, you've heard from folks about concerns on the Staley Avenue crossing, you've heard about concerns about water runoff, particularly in that area. So those are all things that will come back as questions, I'm sure, to be answered at the next meeting. I know there's been a lot of concern. I also have concern about the speed of the people who are on Business Highway 151 and coming down that hill. I recall Barb Stockhausen, when she was on this council, talked about that a lot, the speed there, and even suggested that there should be a speed reduction there. And of course, I don't know how that is, how that happens. I do have one other question. Is there no room for a sidewalk on the north side of business? There's room. Help, I need a review, just like Ken, from 150, the 151 or the Water Street interchange to Staley. Help me remember how that's going to look when this is done.
Okay. Based on what we have right now, that section will be a 3-lane road, two through lanes and a center left turn lane. There will be a wide gutter, it will be a curb and gutter, if you will, but extra wide, so that there would be bicycle accommodations on a 5-foot wide gutter section.
On both sides?
On both sides. Because of all of that, you would be too close to the rock face on the north side to put in a sidewalk in addition to all of that on that north side without a very significant expense. And so the intent was to allow for people to cross at Staley, get onto the trail, and then access businesses between Staley and Water Street using the trail system, because there they can access the backsides of the businesses from the trail. As Isaac pointed out, on the other side of Water Street, you cannot access the businesses from the trail. And that's why we're talking about this now.
Okay, and now that you reviewed that, I do remember that. So I think that probably addresses any further question, Jason, Kathy,
No.
Ken,
No.
Eileen, Isaac,
Nope.
Robin? Okay, then I think we're ready with this particular item also to move it from information and discussion to an action item, again with some further information about the Staley Avenue issues. So we'll now move on to our next information and discussion item, which is municipal pool and recreational program. So Adam, are you starting this one?
I can probably take it. Might make sense.
Yeah.
I didn't know if Adam had introductory remarks he wanted to make about it.
If he does, he can add them now.
Sure. I think, I want to give kudos obviously to Luke and to the staff. This is something obviously we continue to, again, as we've talked about with COVID-19, this is it's new for everybody. So we're trying to figure out, obviously what procedures we should be putting in place, what policies we should be putting in place. And the one we're hearing, the most from residents, and I would say the number one that continues to be a question on any call that I'm on, and I think Luke would echo this, and any of the calls that he's on, is how do you handle recreational programming and how do you handle swimming pools when you're dealing with an invisible threat? So obviously this is where Luke and I, since we share offices right next to each other, daily have this conversation of, what are you hearing from your peers? What am I hearing from mine? So I'll kind of let Luke go over kind of the staff note that he kind of put together, but then I'll also, step in when I feel I need to add something.
Okay, Luke.
Yeah, so I think that was a good introduction, and I think it's great that people care so much. I mean, that feels good that people, are online and giving us calls both ways on this topic. But I think, Barb, you mentioned earlier that, people are going to be mad no matter which way we decide here, and I think that's very true because we get both calls. I get several calls a day on both sides of the issue. So I think we'll just start out with rec programming. At the special council meeting on May 5th, it was decided to postpone recreation programming until at least July 1st. So below I've provided a list of the traditional summer, or in my staff note, of my traditional summer programming that we offer. Both those programs that are provided by the city and those organizations that I would consider partner organizations that utilize some of our facilities. So with that, even if we're able to start July 1st, I think just based on what we're seeing, I think it's realistic at this time to anticipate that numbers will not be where they were, last year, previous years. So with that in mind, I think it's kind of this careful balancing act of, what programs do we want to try to open versus what programs might we just want to say, this year we're not going to be offering that program, just so we have some successful programs without, without opening everything up and have no successful programs, I guess. And again, that's a balance act in itself because we recognize that smaller class sizes are a benefit, but we do have some classes that require a certain minimum just to be successful. So again, just balancing that out. We've made a few proposals. The first was to look at canceling U14 soccer. Right now, I believe I only have one person registered for that, and some of our other communities that we partner with traditionally on that are not having teams. And I think it's just looking unlikely that would be a go this year. Some of our facilities also utilize the school district, and giving the unknown of their facilities, looking at potentially canceling 3-on-3 basketball and gymnastics for this summer. And then we're looking at combining sessions of U5 soccer. So U5 soccer is traditionally very popular, and we usually have 3 or 4 sessions of it. But just we want to make sure we have one session filled before moving on to the next, or one session have 10 people in before moving on to the next session. So just kind of combining how we do that. I did have in the staff note, we're looking at also combining golf to again assure we had enough participants to have a successful program. However, just today I did we do partner with the Platteville Golf and Country Club for that program, and they are requesting that due to the coronavirus that we look into canceling, or they're suggesting we cancel that program for this year. So that would be an update that is not noted in my staff note. I've been in the CDC calls, and there's lots of different information out there with both recommendations to cancel, or if you're going to do it, here's some of the recommendations we would put in place for making it as safe as possible. And I think Barb, I've seen you share a few times some of the Aspen Institute. It's all about what level of risk people want to take, and there's low level risk, there's intermediate, there's higher level, and I think it's fairly easy to recognize and put in place which what type of activities we can do more safely than others, and just know that we would be making our activities as safe as we possibly could, while still allowing for participants that choose to get out and participate to do so. So with that, I guess in terms of this, my main question is, are we still anticipating a July timeline? Do you want us to continue accepting registration for these programs, or has your opinion changed since our May 5th meeting?
Okay, I have a question, Luke. So you have city programs, soccer, U5, U7, U9, and U11 So you would conduct 4 soccer programs and not the 5th. Is
Correct.
that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
And you would not conduct golf at all? And there would
Based
be-
on based on the discussion from the
golf
instructor,
course, yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna have
No
a choice
golf?
other than running something
Yeah.
else.
No golf, no 3-on-3 basketball, no gymnastics. Tennis?
Tennis, we were adapting how we were doing it this year, so looking at doing a camp, which could be scheduled later in the year. We were going to plan it in August anyway, so I think we'd still be looking at doing that.
Okay, and co-ed softball, men's softball,
Looking at running as there's interest in teams with adaptations.
and sand volleyball, co-ed, and women's.
Same thing as there's interest in teams. We've received, most of our teams are interested in playing. We kind of conducted a survey of who was all interested in playing. I think we had only one response that said, due to this, we would not be looking at forming a team this year.
Okay, and co-ed pickleball.
Co-ed pickleball, I think, could be done fairly safely, actually, in minimal numbers.
Okay, so those are our programs that we run. And Luke, everything that I've read talks about providing hand sanitizer, providing not to have paper towels, not blowing, not air dryers in bathrooms, to sanitize the bathrooms on a regular basis that are, and how are we accounting for that, and perhaps even the increased costs in both supplies and in personnel?
Sure. So right now, basically we're cleaning the park bathrooms as often as we can. In terms of hand sanitizer, I am looking at reaching out to the university professor that is making his own hand sanitizer to see if we can obtain it in bulk. I think that would be a good solution because, as everyone knows, hand sanitizer is very hard to find right now. But also, I think as participants sign up for these programs, they need to know that they may need to provide some of these supplies, and encouraging them to do that, to bring hand sanitizer, make sure they're bringing all their own supplies, things like that.
And so you'll develop a sheet that is an instructional sheet.
Absolutely. If we get to go ahead to open programming, yes, we will develop, these are the changes that are in effect for COVID for this program that you're currently signed up for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now we've heard about city-operated programming. We also know that there are partner programs from the Platteville Horseshoe Pitching Association. Luke, have you heard from them?
I have, and they're looking at following our lead. So whatever recommendations we have, they would simply adopt those recommendations themselves.
Okay. And Platteville Youth Diamond Sports. Jeremy, I'm thinking that's probably you, right? Yeah. So Luke, you've talked to Jeremy Johnson?
I have. And Jeremy, there's a number of different teams, which I think puts Jeremy and myself possibly in different difficult positions. So some teams are looking to, practice, others might not be. So he's getting just, what is he able to do? And I guess in my opinion, I would almost handle that maybe as a part of the facilities issue. So if you choose to keep facilities open, then they're open. And I would say then individuals or partner organizations can utilize ball fields. If you choose to close facilities, then they're closed and they wouldn't be able to utilize those facilities. So I actually was hoping to talk about that maybe when we talk about facilities.
Okay, well, they're kind of together. They're kind of separate, but they're kind of together. Wouldn't horseshoe pitching be facilities related too?
It could be, although like I said, they're following our lead regardless, so.
All right. And then Power Soccer.
Power Soccer plays in the Mesa League, which is the Madison Area Youth Soccer Association. And their league has been canceled for the spring.
So there would not be Power Soccer then. We would know that would not be occurring. And then you've already said you haven't heard necessarily from the school district.
Other than from the athletic director has called me. He said he was planning on being here tonight. I don't see him online though. But he had some concerns that, you know, if we have our facilities open, their coaches would be using it. And of course, you know, the school district's policy is that their facilities are closed. And I think he just had some concerns that was sending a mixed message. I would say the summary of our conversation.
Okay. So Jeremy, we'll get to you when we talk about facilities. Right now, we're going to talk about programming, which I don't exactly know how we talk about before we decide if we're going to have facilities. I mean, I think the facility discussion has to be a part of that, because you can't say, yes, we're going to have soccer for everybody under 15, but no, we're not going to have any park open.
Sure. The only difference I would say is facilities could open now, whereas we're not looking at running programming until at least July still. But I can move into facilities if that would be helpful.
I think it would be helpful to hear what your thoughts are on facilities before we have a discussion about programming and then learn that there's a difference in facilities. So let's talk about facilities.
Sure. So one of the main things we're dealing with facilities is of course playgrounds. So with the Safer at Home order, all playgrounds were closed by the state health departments, and the city followed suit and wrapped up swings and wrapped up playgrounds and marked those areas as closed. With that Safer at Home order being struck down by the Supreme Court, there's no direct order closing those or mandating that we keep those facilities closed. However, because we knew we had a council meeting coming up, we wanted to, you know, allow you to weigh in on that before we either open those, or right now we essentially are still following the Safer at Home order and have them closed. But if you'd like to change that, that certainly would be an option. The other areas would be that are seeing use are ball fields, so our baseball, softball facilities. Our soccer fields are currently open. The horseshoe pitch courts you mentioned. So, I mean, there's a whole slew of facilities that have not closed but have been posted with signs in terms of the kind of guidelines, you know, social distancing, groups less than 10, wash your hands frequently, that type of thing, that are posted at those facilities. So just wanted to begin the discussion if that's, you know, what you wanted us to continue to do, or if you wanted to look at opening playgrounds or closing, going the other direction, closing ball fields, things like that.
Okay, so I think now we know basically open areas are open. Shelters
are currently open.
Shelters are currently open. So really, if I go to Smith Park, the only thing that's really closed at Smith Park is the playground equipment.
That is correct.
And if I go to Highland or any of those other parks, the only thing that I would find closed is the playground equipment.
The only thing I should probably add to that would be the adult or the fitness center that is in the Swiss Valley Dog Park area.
That's closed.
That's still currently taped off and closed.
Okay. All right. So I think we have I hope we have a good idea. So Jason, you want to talk to us about your thoughts on facilities, that would be parks, facilities, playgrounds, the fitness center, and also your feelings on programming in those areas, city programming.
I know in the report here, it said that the CDC was recommending not to use playgrounds, but I think there's been some newer stuff saying that the CDC is saying that the virus doesn't, or it's not as much of a risk as I thought it was. So maybe just some clarification there in terms of, you know, where that's all at with the CDC recommendation.
I can update that right now if that would be helpful.
Okay.
So this was written after their, you know, they updated maybe last Thursday or last Friday regarding, you know, the contact time on surfaces is not as transmittable as they, were originally thinking. They update their website, and you can actually look at the bottom, see when things are updated. And even after they updated that, the recommendation they had was for people not to use playgrounds in parks. And I think part of the reasoning justification before that is not just the surfaces, but they tend to be a congregate area. And again, I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just saying that was the reasoning I saw. And the last time I checked was, I believe, this past Saturday.
So they tend to be an area where 15 or 20 or 30 kids get together, is what you're saying? A congregate area, Luke?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying that they're saying.
Okay. All right.
And
Jason?
I guess I was kind of going in a similar direction in terms of, okay, so the risk of getting it from contact surfaces is lower, but again, playground equipment, tends to be, more than just a few kids playing at a time. Sometimes it is, but then you can have where it gets a little bit more crowded. That would be my only, concern. But I think we talked a little bit earlier too about, posting signs, posting things, letting people know what the risk is. So in terms of the playground equipment, right now I would be leaning more towards allowing people to use those again, but having all of the signage, all of the things needed in place to let people know what the risks are. What were some of the other ones that you were looking for, Barb?
Just facilities in general, the programming that Luke has suggested, doing soccer, doing softball, doing volleyball, doing pickleball. I think that was.
Okay.
And
as far as that goes for the programming, I guess I'm leaning more towards, we had talked about looking at July to start things, and I think I'm still kind of in that place of, waiting and seeing, because everything is changing so much. So, again, just kind of giving some time to see how things change. And so I'm leaning more towards just continuing with the July start date of things and going from there.
So to summarize, you'd be in favor of opening the playgrounds and posting those. Is that right?
Yeah.
But holding on programming till July 1, but leaving the fields and everything that's open, so that if I happen
everything
to,
that's open right now, I would
if
say
I happen to
continue
go
to
up
keep
there with
that.
the bat and ball, I can.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can
I'm
hit
okay
my,
with
Well,
whatever's
you'll see me
open.
doing that, right?
Yeah. But no, whatever's open, I have no problem keeping that stuff open. So yeah.
Okay. All right, Kathy.
I agree that I would like to see the playgrounds open with some cautionary signage. Have talked to a number of people who are begging for the parks to be open, and people that I've talked to are very understanding that there are issues and are willing to take precautions. As far as programming, I would lean towards maybe the 1st of July or so to get back into that. But I guess I have faith in Luke that I'm not an athlete, so it would be what he would recommend, and I would be good with that.
Ken.
Okay, just briefly, parks and playgrounds open. I don't believe in starting till probably July 1. And also, I think it's up to staff to make decisions here. And also, I'm concerned about whether or not any records are going to be kept. I assume we'll be keeping records as to who is doing these activities. And my other thing is, will any testing be done as far as people that are using or following the programming? Any testing to be done?
You mean the city to do COVID testing?
Yes, I guess that's a question for the city manager. Or is nothing going to be done?
You certainly could. I think that would be a question where we'd have to look at. That's probably something we'd have to get a legal opinion on that one. Where, you know, and I know Brian's on the call from EMS. I think we as staff would have to look to see what other departments are doing. Where it gets really difficult with that and testing is, again, it all comes down to a legality question. So it's a matter of if somebody has a temperature and now you tell them they can no longer participate and you come to find out they don't have COVID and they don't test positive for it, is there legality there? That's the only question. I think and that's where it goes back and forth, you know, on all the calls I've been on in regards to that question of, it's the same concept, you know, where technically, if you look at the Department of Health Services website, it recommends strongly right now that any type of team activity should be postponed or canceled. So if you go against that recommendation, do we have, as a city, have a right to do that? Absolutely. And as long as we're, again, following the proper procedures and making sure we're trying to keep it as safe as possible, yes. But is there always going to be that legality question? Absolutely. You know, it's just another chink in that case. But I think as staff, obviously, we would look to ensure that, you know, on any kind of rules or regulations that we would be creating from Park and Rec, it would be no different than what we're saying for the city, where we would have the sign saying, if you're exhibiting any symptoms, we strongly encourage, you know, that you would not be, you know, stay at home. The same concept.
But we could require our staff to be tested, probably.
Yes.
Anybody hired, we could probably require to be tested.
Correct.
Right.
To your second point, Ken, we do keep track of who is in our program. So if there's ever a need to, I can't remember the term they use at this point.
Contact tracing.
Contact trace, who's in those programs, we would have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Well,
Eileen.
Frankie believe in leaving more decisions up to the staff.
Eileen.
I concur with most of what's already been said and what Luke has put in his recommendation, which is that the facilities that are open continue to be open. I am in favor of allowing the playgrounds to be opened with the correct or the additional signage or information to the public that it's pretty much at their own risk. We haven't discussed about, and July 1, I think, was the start for the other programs. We haven't discussed the pool. Are we going to discuss that separately, or?
Yep, we're discussing it separately.
Okay, all right. So no, I concur pretty much with what other members have said.
Okay. Isaac.
For the facilities, I think they should be opened up. You know, again, with the proper signage out there of at your risk, please take these precautionary measures. As for the partnering programs, I probably am going to be the lone person here, but I think those people that are in charge of those, most of them are adults, parents themselves, are doing their due diligence on making things safe as well. I think we should allow them to be open as well. So.
Okay. Robin.
I think I'm fine with the idea of opening programs July 1 with just the question or caveat. Obviously, if something were, if the numbers were looking much worse, we would have a way we'd be canceling or notifying people and refunding. But that I would prefer to lean towards opening. And then playgrounds, sunshine, fresh air, I think definitely good for our kids, and Definitely reduces the risk of germs, residing on those surfaces as opposed to indoor facilities. So it's a hard decision to open up the parks, but I think it does fall on the parents to decide whether their kids are going or not. But when other kids start going, it's hard for parents to hold their kids back, and not all parents know where their children are at every hour of the day. So once it's a public decision, it won't be as simple as the parents deciding. So I would appreciate if the signage that goes up is kid-friendly and bold in its suggestions to keep their distance and to wear masks or keep their hands clean. Just really target it at the kids, not just the adults. And then I'm not a lawyer by any means, but the idea of being able to take a temperature of your participant, if we had a child throwing up, we could ask them to leave a sporting event, couldn't we? At some point, you must have some sort of specifications about whether or not someone's participating given their health in general. So I would think that a temperature might be different for participant than someone you're providing public service to, right? We signed up for recreation. It's a privilege. We paid for this. It's separate from what the city hall has to provide. I would think we'd be able to decline it if we didn't think it was wise for all the other participants. And that's all. That's all I have on my list.
Okay, and I'll weigh in. I believe, and I will also mention, and Candace, I've sent you these names. I know that all of the council got messages from Corey and Brittany O'Connell, Beth Gladys, and Beth Ruck, all from the city of Platteville, plus Vincent Kelly Graney, who live in the township, not the city, about playgrounds. So, and their belief that, or their hope that playgrounds would be open. I think it's incredibly important in terms of, I don't see us sanitizing and disinfecting the playgrounds, play equipment. I mean, do you have that in mind, Luke? I mean, most of the stuff I see says that minimally bathrooms should be done twice a day. I would expect playground equipment should be done much more. So I think if we're going to open playgrounds, it has to be very clearly noted that the city takes no responsibility for disinfecting, sanitizing, or anything of that nature, that equipment. And if that people are going to come and use that equipment, it's up to them to bring their own sanitizer, their own cleaner, their own apparatus to clean that equipment, because I don't think you have staff to go around and clean equipment.
That's correct.
Multiple
We're
times a
down
day.
staffed from where we've been in past years, so.
Right. So you don't have staff to do this cleaning. So I think it's very important that we make it very clear that the city is not going to do this. And it is truly at your own risk, not only at your own risk with whoever else is on the equipment, but also at your own risk that you don't know who came before you and what. So, you know, I hear people, but again, I think this is a time when people have to assume some responsibility that perhaps they've never had to assume before. And I don't know how we get that word out there, but I think we have to be very, very bold. It has to be very, very, I mean, the signs have to be very bold. Can't be 8.5 by 11 pieces of typing paper in a plastic sleeve. It has to be much more substantial than that, so that people understand that they are assuming the risk. And July, I mean, I think that the consensus here really is July 1 for organized programming. So that's where I go with that. So now we want to hear, does anybody have any more about facilities or city programming? Did I see you put your hand up, Robin?
Yeah, I did. I just, I wondered where there might be any conflict in what we had presented earlier with the pioneering past COVID and the Badger bounce back and what he's planning to do in programming versus if we're in a phase or not. How strictly Park and Rec is subscribing to those restrictions or guidelines, I guess, that we have.
So look, and Adam, I guess you'll have to give us a more complete picture of how this plan then dovetails or works with the pioneering past COVID-19 plan.
Right. So I think the pioneering past COVID-19 plan, again, it's the morphing of kind of three different philosophies. So it's looking at the recommendations that continue to be out there from the Department of Health Services, everything we're hearing from Grant County, and then obviously all the guidelines we're hearing from the CDC and peers. And I think that's where, you know, what Luke and what staff will continue to do is to partner with all of those organizations to ensure, you know, the general synopsis we've heard is, you know, so far has been July 1 seems to be the date we want to try to do some type of form of programming. As far as everything else with playgrounds, it's to open them up. But again, it's, okay, looking at the guidelines that are out there and how do we make sure that we're continuing to mass communicate and continuing to watch those statistics. So I think that's kind of the answer to your question, Robin, is if everybody in synopsis, what we're hearing is that we want playgrounds to be open, staff will work on going in that direction, putting out the signage. But then there's also the understanding that if all of a sudden we start to see Grant County's numbers, you know, they have the new 6 guidelines that they're following. If they suddenly go red or they go in the wrong direction, well, then we're going to have to do an about face as staff and go, okay, we might need to back up. And now we have to close down playgrounds, or we have to look at doing something that's more restrictive. I think that's what we would be looking to do as staff, and I'll let Luke kind of add anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan actually echoes probably what we are planning in rec as well. So it's following the phases, which would be phase 1, 10 or under. So that might mean if we're doing soccer, we're working on, you know, within individual teams and not playing another team, working on more individual team drill based activities. If we move on to a phase 2, then, you know, we're up to 50 people. So we might be looking at doing more within Platteville, not traveling to other communities, but within Platteville, practicing team versus team, things like that, where, you know, where the phases allow. So it's not that we're just running programming the way it's always been. It's we're looking at adapting within the bounce back program, how we can operate, you know, with relatively lower levels of risk.
Okay, Jeremy is here representing the baseball and softball. Now I've lost my place, Jeremy, in terms of what it's called, but you represent this group, serving as president of this partner organization, and you basically do things with bats and balls. I'm gonna say that. So, and I know earlier today, you and I had a conversation about how you could maybe resume some team sport. And then you said you're working with a group to try to develop some procedures. And I know you sent those to the council people too. So do you want to go ahead and talk about that?
My name is Jeremy Johnson. I live at 550 Western Avenue in the city of Platteville. I'm the current president of what's called Platteville Youth Diamond Sports. We partner with Luke, and we run basically the baseball and softball side of the sports. What I'm trying to do is get a handle on what we can do and what we're allowed to do. We do play in a league that has other communities involved in that league. It stretches basically north of here, Lancaster, Highland, Muscadet, in those areas. That league is right now tentatively planned to start on, I think, like July 6th. So we are looking at not having any sort of that programming played until the end of June, or we can go with the July 1. We're good with that. We do also have Platteville only teams that play some tournaments, or that I would say the more gung ho parents that want to get on the fields. And so we're looking at maybe having small practices. I believe that our involvement is going to be very, very low, probably 40 to 60% of a normal season. One thing that we've decided as our board is we probably will not be doing what is called our rookie league, which is our second graders, first graders, kindergarten area, because it is really hard to keep that age group on task. That becomes just a bunch of running around and we don't feel that we can keep that group safe. So we have pretty much deemed that to not happen. But we do feel that the older, when they play a game, I believe games can be much more safe than practices, because on a baseball, softball field, you have designated areas. They would be all social distanced in the field. We would also, one of the rules, or you saw in the email that I sent out, is we were talking about not allowing spectators between the dugouts. And then we were going to use that area to have the kids basically social distance. So you have that 50 or 80 feet where you could have each child could bring its own chair, and that's their own little dugout. Every 6 feet or 8 feet, you could have someone else down through there, and they would stay in their area. That was one of our thoughts. I have children that play in this. I have a lot of friends that have children that play in this, and my number one goal is to keep the kids safe and to do it safely. And I believe that the plan that we've come up with, we've started to come up with, is very safe. We've taken into consideration a lot of the areas. We're gonna have balls not shared by teams. So when Team A goes out in the field, that pitcher will take his ball out on the field, and he will only pitch that ball. When the other pitcher comes out, he will pitch a different ball, his own ball. Yeah, that ball will get touched if it's hit out into the field, but you can bring that ball back, then that goes to the dugout with that pitcher. You can sanitize it quickly because the other team has got their own balls. We also had rules in there that parents cannot go get foul balls. It has to be somebody from that main team, so that the ball is only interacted with that team. We told all the kids that they have to have their own bat, they have to have all their own facilities, so there's going to be no sharing of equipment. The only area where we might have to share equipment is catcher's gear, but our president, or our director of baseball, works for Rousselot in Dubuque, and he's got access to an unlimited supply of disinfectant and chemicals that his company would donate, and we could spray down things, we could disinfect things with that chemical, which I think we could keep really safe. The other difference, I believe, with programming that we offer versus some of the city offered, is that I am at the ball field every day, probably 4 or 5 hours every day, and our board is all there. And we've made an agreement as a board that if we aren't all 100% on the same page, we do not want to offer programming. So we are all going to be on the same page. All our coaches are going to be on the same page, and they all answer to us because we're an organization. We don't want to mess up this relationship with the city. So I think we can do a very, very fair job. Thank you.
Jeremy also indicated in the document that he sent to all of us that they would not use the dugouts at all. There's the whole issue of food, and everything that I've seen says no concessions provided. So I know that's a really, you probably lived on some of the money that you made on concessions, but likely no concession stand open. And then kids would have to bring their own water, their own stuff. When Jeremy and I talked this afternoon, I said, this is really becomes incumbent on the people who are running the program, because we're not going to station Doug McKinley up there and begin arresting kids when they get out of their chairs and try to, so it's going to really, the people who this is going to fall on are the people who are running the program. Now, I've been up at the field and I've seen kids already batting and playing ball. I've seen hundreds of kids, but I've been up there and I've seen kids. So Adam and Luke, I'm going to start. Adam or Luke, I know you and Jeremy have had some conversations. Would you like to share some of your thoughts?
Sure. I guess I'm of the opinion that if you're choosing not to close the facilities, you're saying it's okay that small groups and families and partner organizations go out there, because I see if you tell Jeremy or any of our partner organizations they cannot participate, you will find all of a sudden they are no longer a partner organization and they're going up there on their own anyway. So I think you control it by closing facilities or not closing facilities. And it seemed to be the consensus of the council that you were not closing facilities. I think the policies that Jeremy has in place are, I know he's looked at Nebraska. I know he's looked at a lot of the other states that have already opened and tried to emulate the things that they're doing that seem to be working. I think it's a good start. So, I would say, I hope it's successful.
Adam, do you have anything you'd like to add before we start around with questions from council members?
No, I think that's not too much more, but I think this is the conversation I think that we need to have going forward as we try to navigate through COVID-19. And I think it's a partnership with everybody. And I think that's everything you hear it's that general saying, we're all in this together. So I think it's the combination of understanding, at the end of the day, it's an amenity are our facilities. That's the whole point of us having city facilities, is there amenities for residents and for organizations like Jeremy to utilize. And the key for us is to ensure that whoever we're allowing to use those facilities, whether it's, a bunch of kids that are just playing a pickup game or whatever, or if it is an organization like Jeremy, if the decision, which it seems to be, is that we want to allow these spaces to be open, it's that we do that, but we do it with the understanding of here's our expectations and our recommendations, and we will allow you to use the facility, but we are recommending you do X, Y, and Z. And it definitely sounds like Jeremy has, kind of taken those into account and is looking to do that. And I think that's what allows this to continue to be successful, because if it's not, it's exactly like we said. If we don't choose to take this thing seriously, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have to become more stringent, and that's not going to come from us. That's going to come from the county, with the health department, and it's going to be the same thing again. So I think it's imperative we all continue to have these dialogues and these conversations and try to figure out the best way to do it that makes everybody happy and able to play.
Okay. Kathy, do you have any questions, any comments relative to Jeremy, bats and balls?
I just have to say, I think that Jeremy, what you put together is extremely well thought out. And I agree with Luke's comments about the partners, and I just think it's really important for the city to move ahead and help make this happen.
Ken, do you have any questions, comments, or?
No additions. I think
Okay.
the program would move forward.
Eileen?
No comments or questions.
Isaac?
I was just going to reiterate what I stated earlier, that if we're going to have the facilities open, and then also as much due diligence as Jeremy and the group has put into it, honestly, I think it's going to be safer having, instead of just people over there doing it on their own, to have his group, as he stated, they'll be there every step and every day. I live right across the street from there, so I see people there every day now, and so I think, with the sunshine, high temps, I think it's best to get people outside. So.
Yep. Robin, anything you want to add?
I guess just reiterating kind of what Isaac's saying is, if they're taking a leadership role, that they really fill that role, and so the kids are going to follow the coach's lead. So if the coaches are standing shoulder to shoulder, the kids are going to stand shoulder to shoulder. So really just continuing the message that you're setting up every week, checking back with all the members that are there and making sure they're enforcing that with their groups. I had just a little flag of concern when you said each kid having his own bat and his own glove or ball, or I don't know if it's glove or ball, but hoping that the program has some sort of rental or checkout for kids who can't provide their own bat. They can get pricey. I know they get competitive with each other over which bats they have too, but that was just a concern.
Jason.
Nothing additional to add. The only thing is that with the facilities, are we going to be putting signs up there too, similar to the playground equipment in terms of like risk and? Okay.
I think we have to.
Okay. Yeah, nothing else then.
Okay. So Jeremy, I also found a whole guidance thing from the Little League. I know it's not Little League, but just reading through some of their information kind of triggers something more in your head. I know, Jeremy, you said you and your group were going to meet more this week and kind of put this together. But I think and Jeremy also said, you know, one of the worst things that could happen is if we have to close down after we open up. And so it's incumbent on all of us to try to keep our eye on the ball, so to speak, and make sure that we stay safe so that we don't slip backward. So, Jeremy, do you need it? I mean, you've heard from us. We're good? Okay.
Barb, can I make a comment or not?
Maureen, yeah, I saw you were there and I saw you shaking your head several times. So
part of the reason I came to this was also this as a PE teacher and as a parent of kids. I just think it's so imperative that, and I'm so proud of our council right now. I can't even tell you that we understand the emotional need for our kids, the physical need that we have for our kids. And as a parent, one of the game changers for me was when they did come out and say, maybe it's not on the things that we touch. So even if, you know, kids have batting gloves on and they're sharing a bat, or, you know, the whole ball thing, that's an okay idea. But some of this, as more information comes out, is we can peel back a little bit, but it's always better to be safer than sorry. And as a parent, I'm thrilled with the conversations I'm hearing. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think that covers a couple of things. And now we have the even more exciting discussion about the swimming. I think that's what's left, right, Luke? I've lost my memo from you. I think that's the next thing.
That is the next thing. So again, at the special council meeting on May 5th, it was decided to postpone the opening of the pool until at least July. Tentative opening date right now would be July 4th, which is a Saturday. But it's one of the things I think I explained to you in my last conversation, that it doesn't just happen. The pool, you know, you can't tell me you want to open the pool tomorrow and it's going to be open tomorrow. It takes quite a bit of time between training staff, getting it filled, getting it chemically treated, fixing whatever broke this past season, and you know, getting it heated too. So it's a process that normally takes us 2 to 4 weeks. I already know I need to train about 14 staff in terms of lifeguard certifications, because we have a very young staff. So that's going to take time, and that requires that the pool to be filled before that takes place. We have tentatively, or we've already canceled session 1 of swimming lessons. We have continued to open session 2, 3, and 4 for swimming lessons, assuming a July opening. You know, but I do know that is still a concern that many have is, you know, both with safety and with the COVID financial discussion of how that's hitting city budgets. Is that a possibility? So I just wanted to continue that conversation and I guess get a feel for where everyone's at, to know, you know, because as soon as I start filling the pool, we're going to start having more and more expenses associated with that. So, I mean, if you give me the go-ahead today that you're 100% sure you want to open the pool this summer, I will probably start filling that pool tomorrow. But if you're still unsure, I'm going to wait. But just know that can also delay when we could potentially open.
So Luke, in your staff note, I'm going to ask the question. It says we would look to limit the occupancy to one person for every 113 feet squared of water surface. What you didn't tell us was how many people is that?
I purposely did that actually.
To see if we were reading?
No, not entirely. It's more complicated than that because it depends on what percentage of the water we calculate. If I calculate the entire body of water, that's about 100 people. If I block off lap lanes and follow the CDC guideline where I am, having 5 lap lanes open, that's a much larger surface of my pool that is not able to be calculated into that, factored into that calculation. So what I would say it's between 80 and 100.
So my thing is, we don't even get to have 50 people in a gathering until we get to phase 2. I mean, it's supposed to be less than 10, then it's supposed to be no more than 50. And I'm going to start because I've thought about this a lot. My concern really is we say 50 people. And you have my daughter, who I don't have, there, and she's 16 years old and she's running the gate. And number 51 comes up and it's her friend. And she says, but you can let me in. And so pretty soon we're asking, in my opinion, we're going to be asking some very young people to be making some very hard decisions and saying no to people who, or it could be, me that comes up and says, and starts just berating someone to the point of saying, what do you mean you only have 50? I'm 51. I'm just really concerned about the employees and what they would have to tolerate in terms of trying to keep people, because the CDC guidelines are very, it says your lifeguards should not be the ones who are keeping people 6 feet apart. So that means you need to hire additional staff to see that people are maintaining social distance. I'm just really concerned about this. But now that I've expressed my concerns about it, we'll start around. Jason?
I would say I have similar concerns as Barb, is just how much extra responsibility that you're putting on the pool staff, and just that the expectations of them to be able to follow the CDC guidelines and hold people accountable. I guess that part of it is the most concerning for me, especially since several times last year when I went to the pool, there was already adult caregivers, parents that were arguing with the lifeguards about the existing pool rules. So if you start to add more into the mix in terms of like guidelines that people have to follow, and there is pushback, I just don't think it's fair for the pool staff, the lifeguards, to have to manage that. I guess in terms of that, I would look to Luke for more guidance or kind of his thoughts on that area. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm concerned about as well, are the guidelines and just the extra responsibility that is going to be put on, or it could be put on, the pool staff.
Okay, Robin?
I guess I was just thinking about Barb's comments of the keeping track of the number and just making it a very public tally, if it were, so that it was not, you'd literally be turning the number and you see I'm out of numbers, as opposed to trusting a kid's word. But definitely see where it would be. I mean, it's heated. People are contentious, and you're going to have people with high expectations for their afternoon, and if they get bad news or they're being asked to leave, it would be very difficult for a group of teenagers to be enforcing those rules. So I hear that. I really do think of all the locations, a chlorinated swimming pool baked in the sun is probably one of the safest when it comes down to it. But I guess I'd just like to hear more ideas and conversation. I really don't know where I sit exactly on this.
Isaac.
One first question would be for Luke. So, Luke, on the average day or average single time in a day, what would be the approximate number of people that would be at the pool?
On it, are you saying with COVID-19 or before this?
No, before. So last year, say at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon or 2 o'clock, usually how many people were at the pool for people?
I could get you the exact number. What I will say is that based on the 100 number I gave you before, that would be a more of our weekend or hot day number versus just your average random time at the pool.
Okay. All right.
But I have daily calculations.
Sure. And I don't need the exact number. I just kind of, that's what I kind of wanted, what you just said, on an average day or towards your weekends, busy, slow times. So I would kind of part what Robin had stated that, bright sun out, heat, the other rays, chlorine, killing the chemical or the germs, might be one of the safer places to go. Again, it kind of goes back to the facilities area where, physically wise and emotionally wise, you've got these kids that they need to get outside and do things. But again, this is Luke's expertise, so I'm actually just going to defer this one to Luke and what he decides to do. So,
Eileen.
Luke, in looking at your staff report, you said that you've canceled session 1 of the swimming lessons and you've reduced the class size for sessions 2, 3, and 4. Is that because you thought it was prudent to do that, or is it because you have fewer people actually signing up for the lessons?
That session would have began before the July date.
The session 1?
Correct.
Okay, but you said you also reduced the class sizes for sessions 2, 3, and 4.
I did, yes, just based on that 10, some of our older sessions, we will allow more than 10 participants in.
Okay.
So I looked at, based on the CDC guidelines and the recommendations from the Red Cross, reducing those class sizes back down. I would say that was the only reason. That would be the reason we did that.
And do you have registrations for the 2, 3, and 4 sessions?
Yes.
Or you do have registrations? Okay. I don't know if there's any way to stagger or count people when they come in, and then or people can come in from 10 until noon and then you have to leave. I don't know if there's a way to do it where you actually can control better the number of people that we probably would feel most comfortable having in the area, and certainly not putting all the stress on the staff to try to enforce it in some way. So I'm leaning toward trying to open it if it can. I know it's expensive to open it, and if we have a shortened season, we won't get the income, and if we have issues, we're going to have to close, and we will have invested quite a bit of money to do that. But I do think that, again, it's one of those things that are available during the summer that a lot of people really, really look forward to. I do think, it's been mentioned already, being outside is not necessarily bad. So I guess I'm leaning toward opening it. And again, looking at if it needs more personnel to monitor or to enforce the rules, I guess maybe that's something you have to bring back to us, Lucas, to give us some idea if you think it's going to be additional expense because of this. And I don't think you've given us any information on that as such.
And as I'm here, Maureen has sent a little chat text to all of us that says, could you ever use colored wristbands and limit pool time to 2 hours so that you come in? So, I mean, you said about counting. So you have 10 until noon, that's the red wristband. And now everybody, you could do pool times, 10 until noon, that's one time. Noon until 2, that's one time. Yeah. And either you come at 10, but the pool completely empties at noon. And then a different group comes in the next one. I mean, I think there are probably, it takes more staff. Right. And so then it becomes investment question. But, you know, I think it's going to take more staff anyway, because I certainly don't believe the lifeguards should be the ones that are taking on additional responsibility when they have lifeguarding. Ken, your comments.
Well, the last meeting I said postpone it to next year. I think that's my answer this year, this session. I'm concerned about it. The only way I'd agree to it is to have small numbers. I like the idea of wristbands, roll in numbers.
Okay.
That
Kathy.
I'm definitely of the opinion that we should open the pool. And from our discussion at our last meeting, is it correct, Luke, that we would be open from like the 4th of July through the end of August? Approximately 2 months. As far as, I would agree that going into it, we would probably need to plan for some additional staff. I totally agree that it should not be the responsibility of lifeguards, but I think a very strong communication needs to be put out there that the decision to open, if it's agreed to do that, is not being taken lightly by the city. And there are qualifiers, there are rules, and if the community members cannot abide by that, the pool could close. I mean, if there's would happen to be problems, but I would like to have it go out as a very positive, optimistic communication from the city that we really, you know, we have these assets, we want the community to utilize them. We will expect the community to follow the rules.
Okay. So Luke, I guess prior to the next meeting, I mean, obviously we're not opening June 1st. And so I don't hear anything but July as the earliest. So I guess we really need some staffing update. I mean, we need to have some idea about the number of people. We need to have some idea about the extra staff that would be required. I'm assuming that there would be no concessions because, I mean, that's pretty much the rule every place, no concessions. And I don't know if you've talked to our concessionaire or not about that, but I would assume there would be no concessions. And I guess frankly, I think, Adam, the last time I talked to you, you told me you had a list of 17 communities now that have closed pools, and it's now probably how long?
I mean, it varies back and forth, but yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And this was as of May 20th that have officially closed their pools. And
so it would be an unusual thing for us to be open. And I don't really know about other Grant County pools. And, you know, then we may have the additional, if pools in the area, for instance, I know Galena is closed. I don't know if Dubuque is closed or not. But we may have the additional pressure of people from out of town. And so while we might, yeah, I think those are all things we have to think about, and we have to think about in advance and how we would handle that. Because, you know, you could have a party come in of 50 from someplace else and take all the space in the pool. So I think that, you know, it's just a really difficult situation. But Luke, I think you're going to need to bring us back some more information about the additional staff that you would need and how you would regulate all that.
I can answer some of those now if you have some time.
Well, it's 9:45 and we still have another item on our agenda.
Okay.
So I think that that's going to be the next time. You're going to have to either get it to us in a memo or something, because we really need to do the next thing on the agenda too. And I don't know about others, but I don't know how long Nicola and Adam have, but we do need to get to fiscal issues that have been identified. So if you can get those to us prior to the next meeting, that'd be good. Okay?
And is there anything that Luke would think needs to be answered in order to keep that July 4th date at this point?
If everything goes well, no. But opening a pool, you know, the heaters are always my biggest concern, to be honest with you. If everything goes well opening, I shouldn't have a problem meeting after, or you making a decision after the next council meeting. You know, it just obviously would, you know, we do have a number of staff members. We have 50 plus staff members that are kind of waiting for an answer as well. And, you know, I don't know, we may reach a time where some of those staff members decide, I can't wait anymore. I need to go get a different job somewhere else. But I think that's just kind of the nature of where we're at. We just, I mean, we don't know.
No, but, and we need what kind of a staffing plan that would be, and particularly how it would relate to keeping a number. So if you can get that, then that'd be good. Okay, Adam and Nicola, where'd she go? Oh, there she is. Are you guys going to do the presentation on fiscal implications?
We are. So let's see. How can I share my screen? Host disabled participant screen sharing. Trying to think. Barb, can you by chance make me the host and then I can try to share my screen?
I can do that, I think. Host. Adam.
Okay.
You are now the host.
All right, so we are going to do this. See if this works. Can everybody see this?
We can, I can.
All right. So this obviously, we wanted to keep this brief, obviously for time, but just to really kind of kickstart the conversation. And I think a lot of the things we've discussed tonight really play into this ongoing conversation of what is going to be kind of a continual, every month this is going to be something, you know, we're continuing to deal with as staff, and obviously are going to be considerations for not only 2020, but into 2021. So what we wanted to do was really just kind of bare bones, lay down some groundwork for the council and just to be as transparent as possible about what staff is seeing in regards to some revenue concerns and what we kind of have started to tackle already in regard to expenditures, the steps that we're taking, and kind of some of the projections and things that we're seeing. I think the big thing we want to stress with this is, again, right now, as we continue to have these conversations, everything is very, very undecided and too new to tell to give you a 100% kind of straight answer. But I think just to kind of showcase what we want to really kind of talk to you guys about just briefly is to look at, you know, overall the 2020 city budget summary, just really briefly touch about some general fund revenue concerns that we're seeing, the general fund expenditure considerations that we're taking into account to kind of tackle some of those revenue concerns, what city staff has already done as far as action steps, and in the grand scheme of things, some of the council staff considerations we're going to have to make with the 2020 budget and also into 2021. So just to kind of summarize again, the city, obviously with our budget, has to create a budget where revenues and equal expenditures. So every year when we do the budget, our revenues are comprised of borrowing, state aids, fees, and taxes. And our expenditures are obviously the operating expenses needed to handle the day-to-day operations, our CIP that we always talk about, debt payments that we have to make, and our TIF. So just to kind of quickly give you the brief summary again, overall, we have about a $15.7 million total budget. 8.3 million of that is the general fund, which is comprised of basically property taxes, other taxes, special assessments, intergovernmental revenues. This is basically all the revenues that would come in, and the general fund is essentially what handles the day-to-day operations. So that's the police, fire department, administration, parks, etc. Then obviously we have a couple of other areas that are specialty kind of funds. We have our taxi, our debt payments that we make, and then our capital projects, and then all of our tips. So as you can see, we anticipated about $15.7 million in revenue, and we anticipated that exact amount going out, essentially a balanced budget. So what we have started to notice, and this is what a lot of municipalities are seeing, is here are the kind of main revenue concerns that we see with the 2020 budget that we want to start bringing to your attention, and what staff really have started to monitor. One, obviously, is the city portion of local room tax. So as you may not know, or maybe you do, the room tax, the way it works is that's obviously the collection that all of our hotels pay in regards to when people buy a room. There's a tax associated to that. That goes to us. 70% of that is given then to the chamber and tourism, and we keep 30%. Well, with obviously COVID-19 and with issues of people not going to hotels or lack of hotels, there is a question mark that we have where we're not sure if we're going to get that entire portion. So normally we had budgeted about 48,000 is what the city would take in. Again, right now it is very early and unclear to tell, but we are doing a lot of different models where Nicola and I have looked at scenarios of potentially what we may get, what we may not get. We've run scenarios of assuming we're not going to collect anything throughout the year and kind of play it out. So as we continue throughout these months, we're going to continue to kind of look at these numbers and update them and kind of get a better revenue picture of what we're seeing. But as you can see, there's other items. There's senior center grants. We anticipate we're only going to get half about that grant. Then it comes into a lot of the questions that we're talking about with, the museum and their tour admission. We budget about $30,000 a year that we anticipate for tour admission. Well, because of COVID-19, we don't know what that number is going to be. So again, we run a gamut of scenarios. This particular estimate looks at about an 80% reduction. So taking in about 20% of what we normally would. The pool obviously plays into that. There's daily admissions, season passes, lessons that make up almost, close to $66,000 of revenue that we would anticipate. Again, same thing. If we close the pool, there's some savings that would be there, but obviously we have a duty, as we've been talking about, for mental health and everything else, that if we can, we want to try to have that pool open. So there's a game that we're playing there with trying to balance those. Television franchise fees, as we learned in April, pretty much they canceled the cable programming. So we anticipate, we were assuming we were going to get about 23,000. We're anticipating we're only going to get about 4 of that. Building inspection permits, that's always kind of a, fluctuation from year to year. When we have larger projects, we get more building, revenue out of that. With COVID-19, we're not sure what that's going to be. So we're anticipating the potential for there to be some type of a, potential loss there. Then the other areas that are always kind of question marks right now is anything related to permits, parking permits with UW Platteville. We don't know if that money is going to be there. Court penalties, parking violations, and just interest with the way the market has been, obviously with COVID-19, the interest rates aren't where, we originally thought they were when we budgeted. So what you can see is we've kind of laid out a couple of items that come to about $548,000 that we're going to be continually monitoring throughout the year as questionable. Now, as you can see, we are definitely in a better position than I think you're hearing from a lot of municipalities, the larger ones, where they're anticipating $1 million worth of revenue shortfalls, and that's because of room tax, sales tax, different things like that. We're pretty, right now, everything we have heard on all of our calls is our property tax revenue is not going to be affected. Our shared revenue right now that we get from the state is a question mark, but everything we've heard is all of those, general transportation aids and things, we don't anticipate losing those. So what staff continues to model is a reduction anywhere from $250,000 to about $400,000 of potential revenue loss. So as we continue throughout the months, we're going to be updating based on projections, and staff will continue to monitor what that means. So obviously what we're looking at then is in regards to expenditure considerations. Well, every time we delay opening something, there's a savings. You know, there's less revenue, there's less expenditure that we're having from the staff. There's things that we're doing specifically with personnel costs where we've looked at, you know, potentially freezing hirings or we've delayed hirings. So that's a savings that we're anticipating to see in the budget. You know, every year there are retirements that we're anticipating, and when we fill those positions, they're not going to be at the same dollar level that that person that left was. So there's anticipation there. We've done some support from other departments. Obviously, with the elections, we had a lot of, you know, salaried staff that helped with that instead of having to bring in outside help. We've talked about the summer seasonals. You know, we were trying to reduce that as much as possible. Limited term employees aren't working in various situations. We are anticipating to see some, you know, COVID-19 related savings with fuel costs being down, with buildings not being open. There's obviously utility decreases that we're seeing. You know, the pool is a scenario. There's a $70,000 savings there that could be with wages. So that's something, same thing with rec programming. You know, it's a revenue neutral. So if we can get it, we'll be able to do it and we'll be able to have that revenue. Then there's obviously a couple of, you know, savings from direct revenue expenditure line items. Room tax, we are only going to pay out what is collected. So that may not be the actual budgeted expenditure that we saw. Same thing with event programming. You know, we're looking at building maintenance costs. Do we defer some of that and save money there? And then obviously any capital project delays that we can do, you know, we're having staff potentially look at those things. So what we've asked staff to do is as best as they can is essentially, you know, tighten the pig. Look at continuing to review revenue and expenditures. So we have asked city departments, Nicole and I have met with every single department and essentially asked them at this point in time to do the best they can to freeze accounts that we know we can see savings in. We obviously are going to do the best we can to continue to operate the day-to-day functions. So this doesn't mean we're going to let things deteriorate. No. But what it means is just to be very cautious in areas that we can save. Travel and conferences. I think it's pretty safe to say I don't foresee anybody going anywhere for the rest of the year as far as that. So we're anticipating some savings there. You know, looking into any of our contingency fund accounts that we have and trying to really, you know, be cautious in what we're spending there. We've asked staff to review any of our general fund outlay accounts and things that have not been, you know, obviously earmarked. Hold off on those purchases. Same thing with professional service accounts. And then obviously anywhere else that we're able to save, we're going to be continuing to look at that. So what this kind of means overall is we are anticipating right now that without any type of COVID-19 stimulus support, there is the potential that there could be a deficit. Now, what that deficit is, it's a moving range. It very well could be zero. We're not sure. You know, it's very possible the revenue that comes in, we're able to balance with the expenditures that we have, but we are anticipating that there is going to be some form of a deficit. Nicole and I, being accounting nerds, tend to continually run every possible scenario we can. And so right now we're anticipating a deficit could be anywhere between, you know, 60,000, could be less, could be 300,000. So what we're looking at obviously is what we have to do to handle any type of shortfall that we see. So with that, you know, we're looking at the potential that going into the 2021 budget, we're going to have to eat some of that shortfall, you know, that reserve. So we may have to dip into reserves to cover that. And what that means is we may need to reduce our 2021 CIP by the amount needed to cover that shortfall. There's the potential that, you know, we've looked at our kind of long financial range forecasting, and we may just continue to fund our 2021 CIP as normal, but that has an impact then on the future, which means, you know, a couple years down the road, that may decrease our ability to have that CIP. You know, we're going to look into scenarios of how we can replenish any reserve we might need to do over the course of years, whether it's 5 years, et cetera. That's a scenario we'll look at. And we may have to propose to the council an increased borrowing amount for a CIP or for a city project in 2021 or into the future. And obviously we'll continue to analyze any other course of action that we can do, whether it's going into the 2021 budget. We may need to, you know, decrease outlay accounts that we had, or look into proposing potential cuts of services, whether that means we don't have summer seasonals, or we decrease staff, or we, you know, look into those scenarios. That obviously is our last case scenario that we want to run. But we just wanted to basically kind of present this as a first step to you to kind of see what we continue to look at on a kind of day-to-day basis as staff, and what potentially we're kind of seeing as we move throughout the rest of 2020. And I guess I'll stop there. Nicola, is there anything you want to add or I missed before we let them fire away with questions?
Sure, we can see if there's any questions.
We can start there then, if you'd like that, to start there. Jason, what kind of questions do you have about revenue and expenditures? Jason, are you there?
Sorry, I was muted. I don't have anything further than what's already been discussed right now.
Okay. Kathy?
I don't have anything. I just appreciate the effort that was put in to keep us posted. It's a given. It's going to be a challenge, but this really helps keep things in perspective. So thank you.
Sure.
Ken, questions?
No questions except my usual request. Could you provide this information in hard copy?
I certainly can, sir.
You know, it wasn't too long, so it shouldn't be too many pages.
Nope, I can get it to you. I will get it to you with the packet of the RFP stuff you want.
Thank you.
Okay, and you could probably just send a PDF of it to the rest of us too. Eileen?
No, I don't have any questions. Obviously, I'll be curious to see if the state is able to keep their amounts that they had originally put in their budget for this year. This year might look okay. I think the question will be 21.
Yep.
And obviously, you'll update us with any information you get from the state or from the federal government regarding any kind of assistance.
Of course.
Which we haven't heard of yet.
Which we haven't heard of yet, right?
Robin?
Well, I'm just glad the two of you just pointed that out, because that was my question. Why am I not aware of what the state is, what the rumblings are? The League of Municipalities, are they asking for certain things? Do we have any indications out?
Yeah, I can give you a quick update on that based on the call I was on today. So they are the governor is supposed to be unveiling either today or tomorrow or Thursday, the plan for the CARES funding that was automatically given to the state that is to be distributed to municipalities. The frustrating standpoint I think that I've heard so far is it is not going to be a formula that is just given to municipalities. It's more or less going to be a competitive grant process. So that's the concern I think a lot of municipalities expressed today is, yes, the funding's there, but you're competing against every municipality. And as we saw with some of the other grant programs that occurred this year, that doesn't always end well for bigger municipalities like Platteville. The federal funding is a little different. The House passed that right away. There was about $500 billion that they recommended be distributed to municipalities. That currently is stuck in the Senate right now. The Senate, the last we heard is they are talking it over, but the potential is we may have something they could agree on by July.
Okay.
A question. I thought the state received wound up with extra money in 2020. Where did that disappear to? The governor and the Republicans, etc., couldn't agree on as to where it was to go.
That potentially what you're talking about is the surplus that they have, which now because of all of the anticipated losses of sales tax and revenue is gone.
Gone.
It's just gone.
I thought it was about $400 to $500 million.
Yeah.
Isaac?
No questions. Adam's done a pretty good job answering them so far.
Right. And I'm sure Adam will keep us apprised. I had a call from a different Grant County municipality today that said they heard rumblings that we were all going to get 5% cuts in our shared revenue. Now, I haven't figured out where that came from or if that's just rumor, but
No,
I'm sure you'll keep us informed.
Yeah, so that is the governor requested that all department heads or all departments cut their budgets by 5%.
5%.
And on all the calls we've been on, they have basically said their last resort will be to cut aid in 2020. But to Eileen's point, 2021 is going to be up for grabs.
All right, well, I echo everyone else. Thank you for doing this. It's keeping on top of it is important because there are lots of decisions that have to be made over the next months. So thank you very much. That concludes the work session. So that means we're at the bottom of my agenda, and it's 10:02 p.m. So I think that if no one has any objections, I could call for the motion that allows us all to leave.
Motion to adjourn, Barb?
Okay, I heard a motion to adjourn and a second from Eileen and Jason. We can do that any way you guys want, but I believe those were the two voices I heard. So Candace will vote.
Klein?
Yes.
Stanley?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Hop?
Yes.
Arts?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Motion
And
carries.
a special thank you to all the staff for all your preparation and to the council. I mean, I hate to say it, but we're getting through these. Maybe someday again we'll see each other in person. But have a good week.
Bye.